Chapter 437. Yes. A few martial artists replied, and jumped down. He looked into the distance, his thoughts flying. He was still young and inexperienced, leading Draco Constellation's strongest army, had always been a controversial position. He urgently needed a victory to stabilize his position. He was looking forward to the expressions of the people and what kind of scene it would be. Sima Xiao laughed. People always need something to chase after. Do you plan to participate in the clan elders meeting? Qiu Zhijun asked. Qiu Zhijun suddenly said, between Long Zhu and Tang Tian, who do you think will win? It's a pity I cannot personally witness the battle. It truly is a pity. Sima Zhao's face was filled with regret. His fingers quickly swept past the desserts, and the desserts flew into his mouth like raindrops. Mr. Wang's expression was calm. He had seen such expressions too many times, and was long used to it. I don't know. Sima Xiao shook his head, but Wang Yi took away the newest spirit general. I am very curious about their performance. If that's the case, then your target can only be Tang Tian. Qiu Zhijun was surprised. Speaking about it, I have always found it strange. Tang Tian and we do not have any conflict, we mind our own business. I do not understand why you always pay attention to them, and even fear them. Sima Xiao laughed. Wrong, I am not gloomy, I am unscrupulous. As long as I can win, I need to be open and above board, and I will be open and above board. Furthermore, I am very interested in the spirit generals in Tang Tian's hands. If we are able to create even more powerful spirit military generals, then that will be even more powerful. Qiu Zhijun reported. The vibrating mountain army has already entered Ursa Major Constellation. They will quickly meet up with Tang Tian and the rest. Qiu Zhijun continued. With your personality, since you have already treated him as your opponent, then you will definitely lay down a trap. I understand Long Zhu is the enemy you prepared for Tang Tian? Sima Xiao frowned, after a moment. Actually, I do not understand why, but every time I see Tang Tian, or hear news about Tang Tian, I will feel that he will be a threat to me in the future. The surname Long, in Draco Constellation, was a big surname. Almost 70% of the higher-ups of Draco Constellation were surnamed Long. Long Zhu was of noble birth. His grandfather was one of the two saints of Draco Constellation in the past. However, he did not have much interest in cultivation since he was young. Instead, he stayed in the red light district and did not do any proper work. Sima Xiao stopped and placed the desserts back into his plate, and spoke with a serious expression, because I have high hopes for them. His father had no choice but to harden his heart and send him to the army, wanting him to suffer for a few years. Unexpectedly, after a few years, when he returned home, it was as if he had changed into a different person, and his bearing was extraordinary. While his father was pleasantly surprised, he began to secretly try to push him to an important position. What are you going to do? Sima Xiao said disapprovingly, two stubborn old fogies, talking about all these useless things, it's a waste of time. Oh, they were too old to keep up with the times. It didn't matter if one was old, but if one was stubborn when one was old, then that was stupid. Besides, I don't like people without initiative. Sima Xiao scoffed. Don't tell me you expect him to be loyal? The bigger his ambition, the better. The bigger his ambition, the more he dares to make a move. He has the ability and ambition, that is the best. I can support him to become the Heavenly Dragon King. Control? From the start, I have never thought of controlling the 5 polar domains. Even if I were to go to such a poor and broken place, I would be too lazy to go. The change in Ursa Major Constellation happened in just a few days. Facing such a huge change, the entire Draco Constellation was at a loss. In the 5 polar domains, in terms of fighting power, Ursa Major Constellation was the strongest. In terms of overall strength, Cepheus Constellation and Cassiopeia Constellation merged to form the immortal Martial Constellation was undoubtedly the number one. And Ursa Minor Constellation and Draco Constellation were lacking by a large margin. No problem. The middle-aged man said straightforwardly. Mr. Wang ordered a few martial artists beside him. Go, get rid of all those people who are in the way. If they were able to subdue him, it would be of great help to the master. Long Zhu was a person who held a high position at such a young age. and his future was limitless. If he managed it well, he might be able to become the Heavenly Dragon King. You have high hopes? Qiu Zhijun was surprised. Lupus constellation is just one of the most declining constellations in the southern sky's 42 constellations. Even Andromeda constellation is just a northern sky constellation. With such a small power, I truly cannot see what is it about Tang Tian that is worthy of you being so fearful and optimistic about. It is because he is not mature, that is why we need to test it out. Sima Xiao stopped and said unhappily, "We have wasted too much time previously. It was not easy for us to develop a unique fighting method, but in the end, we spent all our time scheming and wasted all our time on internal strife. If in those years, we had placed our focus on researching on even more powerful spirit generals, who knows how much stronger we would be." This statement made Qiu Zhijun even more surprised. Tang Tian's strength is not bad, his potential is huge, and he is an outstanding martial artist. This segment, but for you to actually view him as your opponent, I am unable to understand. Do you really think that your path will work? Spirit generals are strong and martial artists are weak. There has never been a good ending. Qiu Zhijun was a traditional martial artist and did not reject spirit generals, nor did he like them. And the clan union's path of using spirit generals as the main path, to him, was already a crooked path. What if he wins? Qiu Zhijun suddenly said. Sima family. Long Zhu's methods were extremely powerful and very quickly managed the vibrating mountain army like an iron bucket. Mr. Wang sneered in his heart. Long Zhu was extremely ambitious and was unwilling to be left out. If not for that, how could he convince him? And Long Zhu looked to be carefree, but in truth, he had many schemes in his heart. Such a person, if they did not let him see their own strength, how could he be convinced? The elites of Ursa Major constellation were all out, and the current territory was empty. If they could take advantage of the situation, there was a huge possibility of taking down Ursa Major constellation. Even if they could not take down the entire Ursa Major constellation, taking down a few planets would still be a huge achievement. Long Zhu's skin was white, his eyes were long and narrow, the corners of his eyes were slightly raised, his long hair draped over his shoulders. Although he was a man, he had a rather charming aura. Because of that, he received the love of many ladies. Qiu Zhijun was surprised. Isn't the technique not mature yet? Who knows? Sima Xiao looked at his senior brother and smiled. But it is worth the risk. This is the only chance for the clan union to rise up. Comparing martial techniques and treasures, we are not the opponent of the Honorable Martial Alliance. Comparing armies, we are not the opponent of Leo constellation. Comparing blood meridians, we are not the opponent of Onyx Soul. We need something of our own, to be able to become stronger. Although this path is unknown, but at least it seems to be the most likely path. And just at that time, the original commander of the vibrating mountain army contracted a strange illness, and had no choice but to select a new commander. Long Zhu consecutively defeated a few candidates, and became the commander of Draco constellation's strongest army. I will have to trouble Mr. Wang with those small fishes. Long Zhu bowed slightly, and smiled at the middle-aged man. Furthermore, he had a strong ally. Qiu Zhijun understood the fate of the two clan elders, and suddenly said, 12 seats, you have already obtained the support of 9 seats, I am curious, why did you not snatch the position of alliance leader? Actually, you do not want to be under others, even if it is the Honorable Martial Alliance, Onyx Soul, or Leo constellation, you are not willing to lower your head. Qiu Zhijun said indifferently, teacher said that your character is the true pride, and indeed he was right. Long Zhu's way of speaking was extraordinary. He was experienced, and deeply liked by Dragon King Tian, and his romantic and uninhibited nature made him even more praised by the higher-ups. At that time, many people sighed. The grandson of a saint was actually so depraved and could not be saved. The few guards by Long Zhu's side revealed looks of disdain. The light body techniques of the few martial artists that jumped down were not that good. They were unable to understand why the master would care about them. Wang Ye's evaluation of Long Zhu is, he is shrewd, good at scheming, and extremely ambitious. Qiu Zhijun looked at Sima Xiao. This kind of person, even if he were to pledge allegiance, I am afraid he would be two-faced. Long Zhu immediately realized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Sima Xiao kept stuffing snacks into his mouth and said without raising his head, "What's so good about that seat? It's just a puppet, I don't want it at all. Just like the patriarch of the Sima family, I don't want it at all, let the first branch do it. It's good like this, whatever you want to do, you can do it. No one dares to go against you, and there's even someone to be your shield, such a good thing, where else can I find it? Your methods are too sinister." Qiu Zhijun frowned. Just when the entire Draco constellation was at a loss, Long Zhu received a large amount of insider news. Yan Yonglai was dead, Tu Qing was obstructed. As expected of senior brother. Sima Zhao's face revealed a bright and innocent smile. Since I feel threatened, I will definitely face this threat head-on. Danger must always be nipped in the bud, that is the best. If he dies, then everything will be over. Then he will be the target of everyone. Sima Xiao nonchalantly picked up a piece and sent it to his mouth. Long Zhu has taken over Ursa Major constellation, whether or not he can defend it is hard to say. And if Tang Tian takes over Ursa Major constellation, then how many people will be jealous? Such a big piece of meat, who wouldn't want to share? Chapter 438. They had witnessed the chaos of the mechanical army previously. On the battlefield, the difference between a recruit and a veteran was the difference between life and death. No matter how well trained a recruit was on the battlefield, to be able to display half of their strength was already considered good. Before he finished, the right side of the horizon suddenly rose a bronze color. The trembling of the ground became even more intense. The rumbling sounds were like thunder rumbling in the clouds, rolling over. Long Zhu's face changed. He was too familiar with the sound. It was the sound of a heavy army advancing quickly. Everyone immediately retracted the smiles on their faces. But halfway there, he was stopped by someone. Long Zhu also laughed. He clapped his hands. "All right, I think the enemy's assault will take at least another 2 minutes to reach us." Being in the midst of it, Wang Yi felt that he was extremely small. He knew that Long Zhu was flaunting his martial strength, but he was still shocked and even believed it. Just as Long Zhu was thinking, suddenly, the ground trembled. Long Zhu had long seen the change in Wang Ye's expression from the corner of his eyes. His heart was shocked, but when he realized that the 8 martial artists facing each other were not frightened at all, he was surprised. Ordinary martial artists, facing the sudden eruption of an army's imposing aura, were unable to handle it. There were many things to pay attention to when initiating an assault, for example the morale to press forward, or the high-speed assault to be able to tear apart the enemy's formation, and the crux of all of these was distance. If the distance was too long, running for a long distance would consume too much of the physical strength and true power, and would cause the speed of the army to slow down, the morale would gradually drop, and the assault would lose its momentum. Long Zhu, who was high up, exclaimed. He turned and smiled at Wang Yi. "I never thought that the numbers would be just right." Long Zhu and Wang Yi looked at each other. Under Tang Tian, didn't he only have the Lupus army? Why would he have a heavy army? Be alert, we definitely cannot lose. Whoever dares to drop the ball at this time, when we return, everyone will take care of him. Wang Ye's heart trembled. The reputation of the Vibrating Mountain Army was not as prominent as the Grizzly Bear Army, but after personally witnessing it, he realized that the Vibrating Mountain Army's strength was astonishing. Long Zhu's face revealed a sinister smile. So what if it was a mechanical army? In front of his Vibrating Mountain Army, it was as weak as paper. He suddenly said to the martial artists beside him, "Stop advancing and give up the battlefield. Let everyone enjoy this fierce battle." Until now, Alan still did not know where their destination was. Under Master Bing's orders, they continued to advance, and advance. They did not encounter any enemies along the way, which was completely different from what everyone had expected. Where did this heavy army come from? One of Long Zhu's generals gestured vividly, and everyone burst out laughing. Many people muttered in their hearts. Everyone laughed even louder, and some people even had tears in their eyes. It was a mess. For this group of recruits, when they encountered an actual enemy, they would never be able to perform as they usually did in training. Long Zhu truly has some standards. This vibrating mountain army seems to be much stronger than I thought. The order was immediately passed down. All the mountain-shaking lizards lowered their bodies and raised their heads. The martial artists on their backs all had solemn expressions. Han Bingning stood with her sword in her hand without saying a word. She turned around and glanced at the light pillar in the distance before looking away. "Everyone get ready. At least we did not come too late." Liang Qiu heaved a sigh of relief. His face had a trace of blood, but his expression was calm. Wang Yi only felt the ground beneath his feet trembling, the sky and earth spinning. He was shocked, his body almost flew out, and an orderly roar sounded out in his ears. After the initial shock, Long Zhu quickly calmed down. Seeing the chaos in the enemy's army, he could not help but laugh. So it's a group of amateurs. That power just now was truly terrifying. Alan did not think too much. To him, obeying orders was the most important. Everything in front of the torrent would be completely crushed. But in the eyes of Long Zhu and the rest, it made them unable to restrain their laughter. Everyone answered loudly. "Fight, fight, fight." The surrounding martial artists all relaxed and laughed out loud. Sima Xiangshan crossed his arms. Like a mist floating in the air, he gave off a sinister feeling. "Seems like the clan union's strength is much stronger than I thought. They are obviously stupid to the point of not wanting their lives." Long Zhu's expression became solemn. "Prepare to charge." The vibrating mountain army was Draco Constellation's strongest army. Every single one of them had rich battle experience. Seeing such a recruit army, it was like seeing a big joke, causing an uproar. Long Zhu clapped his hands and laughed. "For us to watch this battle, we will naturally liven things up. Li Gu, let the children give the brave warriors a boost." He flew out of the pavilion, his true power surging. He said sternly, "General's orders, the entire army will be there to boost the morale." Steady, steady. The distance between both parties was quickly decreasing. The vibrating mountain lizard was frantically increasing its speed, and when both parties collided, the vibrating mountain lizard's speed would increase to its maximum. "Yo, they are starting to charge at us." A military general seemed to have discovered a new continent, and said excitedly. The four martial artists beside Wang Yi looked to be weak, but were actually relatively calm. "Charge!" The four of them met with the obstruction of two King Bear martial artists, and after spending a great deal of effort, they were able to obtain victory, and the four of them suffered different degrees of injuries. But I feel that we need to give them a good lesson, and let them understand what is called a charge. Bing did not say a word. He rode on Sky Tiger and rushed to the front. Long Zhu's vibrating mountain army unexpectedly stopped, and four martial artists rushed out from the troops and flew towards the palace. Long Zhu's reaction was extremely fast, and said solemnly, "Everyone turn right, stay alert, there is an army approaching." The enemy's military general, how amateurish are they? In that moment, the last bit of haze in everyone's heart dissipated. All of them rubbed their fists, waiting for the enemy to rush in front of them, and then they would give them a head-on blow. And the four people who suddenly rushed in were also very calm. Immediately, the surroundings became chaotic. The roars of the squad leaders immediately exploded out, filling the entire army. 500 vibrating mountain lizards rhythmically patted the ground, as though they were beating a drum. Interesting, who knows, it might really be a fierce battle. A swift and fierce-looking martial artist beside Wang Yi replied, "Yes." Or maybe it was a long-distance training. The huge vibrating mountain army actually did not make a single sound. So, when Long Zhu and the rest saw that the enemy was so far away, and yet they started to rush forward in a disorderly manner, that was why they laughed out loud. The troops behind them, after the initial chaos, started to become neat and tidy. After all, their daily training was extremely strict, and all of the students were picked out from 100, and their qualities were relatively outstanding. With the order, a loud bang sounded out. The hundreds of vibrating mountain lizards' feet exerted force at the same time, converging into a muffled sound, causing Wang Ye's chest to feel stuffy. The vibrating mountain lizards were extremely large, but their movements were extremely agile. Under the high-speed charge, The impact produced was incomparable, and the scene of hundreds of vibrating mountain lizards madly rushing at the same time was extremely shocking, like an unstoppable flood. With such a long distance, by the time the enemy rushed over, they would be exhausted and powerless, waiting to be slaughtered. Pay attention to your position. The roars mixed with the muffled sound of the ground trembling, causing Wang Yi to feel as though he was in a raging wave, and could not help but be overwhelmed with shock. His gaze swept across Long Zhu and the others. All of them had excited and ferocious expressions on their faces. Suddenly, the sentinel at the front shouted, "Prepare for battle! There are enemies ahead!" Long Zhu could not help but smile. The enemy's charge was truly too amateurish. To any army, charging was one of the most important methods of battle, so the training of charging was usually part of their daily training. Relax, relax, don't be nervous, do as usual." Wang Yi laughed out loud. "Great Dragon has such lofty sentiments. Seems like you have a card up your sleeve. This little brother will naturally accompany you." Wang Ye's mind involuntarily jumped out with the words, "arrogant soldiers and valiant generals." Lin worked hard to control the true power in his body. The past few days of rushing through the night and day, everyone's physical strength was being depleted very quickly, but luckily everyone's daily training was not excessive, and very quickly everyone found their rhythm, and became skillful and at ease. Lin quivered, the blood in his body rushing straight to his head. Were they going to fight? Bang, bang, bang. The enemy's military general is too powerful. Look, if we were to charge normally, this army is still in a mess? What do we do? Then let's lengthen the distance. Alright, 2 li of charging distance. Let's go for 4 li. That's a little short. Then let's go for 6 li. After running for 4 li, we should be able to tidy up the army. Starting to charge from so far away, that's really stupid. Bing did not say a word. He acted as though he did not see the chaos in his own army, and continued to advance. Coming early is better than coming at the right time. The moment we arrived, there's a fight. That feels great. A Maori clenched his fists so hard that they made ka sounds. He laughed. The clothes on his body were extremely tattered. Chapter 439. The surrounding military generals, upon seeing the disheveled and crazy general rushing at the front, their eyes immediately turned red. He immediately turned to look at the right side of the troops, where a silver army that was flickering with light seemed to have rushed out from the void. With classes as units, under Bing's command, they continuously rushed out from the defensive line, like blades, continuously stabbing into the vibrating mountain army. The vibrating mountain army that had lost its general was slowly being cut up, separated, and dismembered. Furthermore, it was the best opportunity for them to fight. His unparalleled was to charge. When the vibrating mountain army was distracted by the lupus army, Bing suddenly gave the order to speed up. It was the first order he had given since the start of the battle. Charge! The speed of the lupus army caused Long Zhu to be shocked. And it was obvious that the opponent was a well-trained army. Even when they were charging, their formation was still as neat as a ruler. Bing had been the chief instructor for so many years, and his understanding of the recruits far surpassed the other military generals. He was very clear, to throw the recruits into a cruel and intense battle was to seek death. If they were to clash head-on with the vibrating mountain army, even with Bing's command, they would still be defeated. Long Zhu's heart suddenly surged with a cold intent, although he did not know the opponent's assault tactic, but just from the formation of the army, it made him understand that the opponent was definitely strong. He continued to command the students, and started to cut up the opponent's army. The extremely tight defensive formation was airtight. Bing's cold voice could be heard by the entire team. With a few flashes, he grabbed onto a few mechanical spirit weapons that were muddle-headed, and threw them back to the team behind him. From the start, Bing did not bet on the group of students from the Sky Marshal Wolf Academy. To him, it was the best opportunity for him to fight. Furthermore, he had the trump card of the Lupus army equipped with the Andromeda battle gown. He had sufficient confidence. From start to finish, Bing was extremely calm. Often, a few mechanical spirit weapons would rush at the vibrating mountain lizard at the same time. These hot-blooded youths had even forgotten their usual martial techniques and only instinctively used brute force. Xiao Wu, defend! Long Zhu's heart was filled with despair. The vibrating mountain lizard's speed had already increased. Its astonishing body made it unstoppable when it charged, but this also meant that it had another weakness. Once it increased its speed, it was almost impossible to change directions. But at that moment he could not care about anything else. The Lupus army had completely penetrated through the vibrating mountain army, and they had to completely turn around and increase their speed before they could begin their next assault. Such a thing that defied common sense was happening right before his eyes. And in many people's eyes, although they were ambushed, the Lupus army was not a heavy army. Although they had to pay with a portion of casualties, but with a sufficiently thick formation and the gigantic body of the vibrating mountain lizards, it was enough to slow down the enemy. And as long as the opponent's speed slowed down, even if they lost half of their men, they had the confidence to get rid of the weak Lupus army. A heart-shaking collision sound rang out. Both sides were like two powerful torrents that fiercely collided with each other. Both of them were similarly enormous and heavy. Kill! The dragon bamboo was unstoppable, forcefully piercing through 5 lines of defense before it was stopped. Tang Yi's eyes were like lightning, the light aura exploding out. He raised the Zanbato in his hand. The vibrating mountain army in front of him did not move him at all. To other people, the assault of the vibrating mountain army might be extremely impactful, but to Tang Yi, he did not even place it in his eyes. His assault was unparalleled under the heavens. Following closely behind were 30 smaller light spears, arranged in a fan shape, entering the chaotic vibrating mountain army. All of the light spears were extremely sharp, effortlessly piercing through the bodies of the vibrating mountain lizards. They continued to fly forward, piercing through 5 or 6 of them before disappearing. Even if it was a frontal assault, he was not afraid at all. Long Zhu and the vibrating mountain lizard beneath him suddenly lit up with a conical light barrier. The conical light barrier pointed forward, like a battering ram. Long Zhu's hands and feet turned cold. The student facing Long Zhu, the moment the shield in his hand touched the light barrier, he knew that the force was not something he could endure. The moment he was struck flying, he jumped up with all his might. His underlings immediately reacted. That's right, as long as they rushed into the mechanical army, both parties would be mixed together, the enemy would be worried about their allies, and would be unable to unleash the terrifying might of their assault. But the morale of both parties were on completely different levels. Only the master would have such boldness. Seeing Long Zhu rushing left and right in the encirclement of Class 31, Bing's expression was calm. The counterattack of the enemy before death would only be more ferocious than before. Long Zhu leapt up, jumping onto the head of his 8th-level vibrating mountain lizard, fiercely slapping it. Activating his true power, he bellowed, "Charge! Charge forward! Those who retreat will die!" But he had already lost the advantage of speed and was trapped in the formation, in imminent danger. What was worse was that the gap that he created was quickly filled up by Little Five. Long Zhu's gaze landed on the silver flickering strange battle robes, the Andromeda battle robes. That was the Andromeda battle robes. It must definitely be the effect of the Andromeda battle robes. Could it be the effect of the Andromeda battle robes was actually invisibility? Long Zhu bellowed and took the lead. The martial artists behind him continuously released rays of light auras. Like raindrops, they entered Long Zhu's body. Over 10 m tall gigantic bronze shields, on top of them crisscrossed sharp spikes. It was extremely terrifying, like a bronze wall with spikes. And beside them, there were half-squatting substitutes, ready to provide support at any time. And behind them, there was a 15 m long empty space, half-squatting with shields defending mechanical spirit weapons. Their mission was to deal with the enemies that were attempting to jump into the formation from the sky. Bing had racked his brains and made all sorts of arrangements, just for the current situation. Very quickly, the vibrating mountain army was sliced into 10 pieces. They frantically rushed forward, wanting to rush out of the encirclement, but the enemy had too many people, and their coordination was gradually becoming better. The vibrating mountain army felt that the rope binding them was getting tighter and tighter. Bang! After experiencing the long-distance charge, the mentality of this group of recruits had already gradually adjusted. This time, the acceleration was just barely passable. Bing knew the true test had just begun. The vibrating mountain army had not regained their senses from the sneak attack, and did not place the rookie army in front of them in their eyes. As for the mechanical army that Bing was leading, they did not think too much, although the youths were not calm and experienced enough, but they were full of drive. Most importantly, they had an overwhelming advantage in numbers. Bang bang bang. So scary. Abandon your mounts. Kill. Third class 1 tech. But at that moment, Long Zhu had no path of retreat. If he waited for the Lupus army to turn around, then all of them would fall. Kill. Not good, there's an ambush. Long Zhu's eyes twitched. His mechanical spirit weapon instantly flew into the air, and he relaxed. That's great. It did not affect the line of defense behind him. He knew that the opponent was strong, but he did not expect that the opponent's assault would be so ridiculously strong. The Lupus army did not have any intention to attack. Tang Yi's mission was actually just to attack. Could it be that Master, from the start, planned to use this army for the Sky Martial Wolf Academy's youths to train? Everyone's face changed. No matter how dangerous the situation was in the past, Master had never asked them to give up on the vibrating mountain lizard. They had interacted with the vibrating mountain lizard day and night, and had deep feelings for it. To ask them to abandon their mounts, many of them could not help but hesitate. The weight of the mechanical spirit weapons, compared to the vibrating mountain lizard, were not any lighter, so when they launched their assault, the impact was extremely shocking. Although it was the first time for this batch of students, but all of them were young and vigorous, and all of them released their full strength. Just at that moment, a strange rumbling sound suddenly came out from another direction. Seeing the line of defense in front of him, Long Zhu immediately understood. Every step was meticulously arranged by the opponent. The Lupus army roared in anger, and waved their blades at the same time. Countless blade auras were like raindrops, converging on Tang Yi's body. Long Zhu roared, his face contorted sinisterly, and no longer had the elegance he had before. He was like a wild beast on the brink of death, releasing its final roar. That also meant, in this short period of time, the entire mechanical army only had to face roughly 100 enemies. Bing's prestige among the students was extremely high, although the victory had caused everyone's blood to rush to their heads, but they gradually calmed down. Both parties clashed without any fanciful moves. Everyone frantically urged the vibrating mountain lizards to rush forward. They did not care about their comrades who were struggling and wailing on the ground, or the vibrating mountain lizards that were not dead yet. Under the trampling of the torrent, they were all turned into meat paste. To Long Zhu, it was his only chance. Heavy spear assault. It was not easy to find such a powerful military general to be his sparring partner. Risk it all. He was also in awe of the master's methods. So fast. The Lupus army that had pierced through the vibrating mountain army had already broken away from the enemy's formation, and left behind a 50 wide empty space in the enemy's formation. That also meant that the enemy's front and back were separated. At the start, when they chose the position to attack, Bing had requested for them to attack at a quarter of the enemy's formation. Once he started his assault, regardless of whether it was the vibrating mountain lizards or the other armies, in his eyes, there was no difference. His words were like thunder, and the Zanbato slashed down. Xiao Wu, who was long prepared, led a group of mechanical spirit weapons, and rushed to the front, and stood firmly. These mechanical spirit weapons were different from the other mechanical spirit weapons. They were equipped with specialized defensive mechanical spirit weapons. Xiao Wu's personality was extremely calm and collected. Even in the face of a landslide, he would not change his expression, and it was because of this personality that Bing allowed him to lead a specialized defensive team. After experiencing a short stalemate, the vibrating mountain lizards were sent flying one after another. The scene of the vibrating mountain lizards' huge bodies being sent flying was extremely shocking. This was what the instructors had repeatedly told them during training. An outstanding shield defense soldier did not mean that he could block all attacks, but that he could always make the right choice. Long Zhu's face changed. The enemy's clumsy assault was simply a feint. The enemy's true killing move was the army that was lying in ambush at the side. Lupus army. Long Zhu suddenly realized, the army that looked to be flickering with silver light was the Lupus army under Tang Tian's command. Without hesitation, Bing led the mechanical army and suddenly increased their speed. But they could not handle the numbers. The mechanical army crashed into the enemy's formation. How could I not realize it? Long Zhu's face revealed a look of despair. A gigantic light spear shot out from Tang Tian's hand, like a red-hot metal skewer. It sliced through the thick layer of oil. The mountain-shaking lizards, which were as large as a mountain, were easily split into two. In that moment of hesitation, the Lupus army rushed to within 50 m of the vibrating mountain army. Long Zhu completely did not expect the scene in front of him. He felt as though he had fallen into an ice cellar. His entire body was filled with a bone-chilling cold intent. If everything was planned, then the enemy's commander, how terrifying would he be? Bing did not make a move, but ordered a squad to go up and fight. The commander that was trapped in the formation was like a wild beast in a net. No matter how they struggled, they could not escape. Long Zhu suddenly bellowed, "Rush, rush into the mechanical army." That was their true assault, vibrating mountain charge. The vibrating mountain lizards that were sent flying smashed into the formation behind, and it was another mess. The army was in a mess. The vibrating mountain army had experienced many battles, but none of them were as desperate and strange as the one today. In front of them was a mess. Long Zhu raised his head, his eyes filled with shock. When did the enemy start to increase their speed? But at that moment, he already had no path of retreat other than rushing forward. He had no other choice. A light army actually effortlessly pierced through a heavy army. Chapter 440. Seems like this master of yours is usually not loved and respected by you guys. Sima Xianxia said faintly. Kacha. Wang Yi let out a pitiful wail like a pig being butchered, his entire face distorted. The 4 bodyguards and a Maori and the other 3 were in a standoff, but both sides were attracted by the sudden battle and forgot to fight. At that moment, the 4 bodyguards heard Wang Ye's cry for help and immediately reacted. Without saying a word, they abandoned a Maori and the other 3 and ran towards Wang Yi. Suddenly, an intense energy undulation came out from the palace. How to shorten the recruit period, how to promote the potential and talented basic officers, etc. All these problems, he had spent countless of his blood and sweat in the past. In the midst of the chaos, the vibrating mountain army was slowly being cut up, dismembered into small pieces. Save me! Bing was already too lazy to look at the battlefield. He had already skipped over the battle and was thinking about the next few steps. A clear and crisp sound came out. A palm blocked Han Bingning's sword tip. Hearing that, Wang Yi, who was in extreme pain, could not take it anymore and immediately fainted. All right, Draco Constellation's army can only be like this. Han Bingning then saw the enemy clearly. It was actually a spirit general. Just that this spirit general was different from all the other spirit generals she had seen before. Because it did not look like a human, but more like a mythical evil spirit. Its body was as thin as a match, its head was huge, its face was ugly, its arms were extremely long, almost touching the ground. Its 10 fingers were like bird claws, its nails were sharp and were jet black. The other 3 bodyguards also summoned their own spirit generals. Ling Su, who was on the roof, had his eyes explode, his face full of shock. What is that? How can there be such an ugly spirit general? Out of the 4, Han Bingning's light body technique was second only to Sima Xianxia. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed behind the enemy, his cold sword unsheathed. Sima Xianxia grabbed onto Wang Ye's neck and said faintly, "The battlefield is such a chaotic place, don't run around." Crane's fingers that were holding onto the sword had turned white. He lowered his head and muttered to himself, his tone gloomy. Ling Su was also shocked. The last time Bing displayed was a military general's superb control aura techniques, but today, Bing did not even make a move and only commanded and dispatched orderly. It was like a brilliant chess player who didn't make any moves that showed off his abilities. Every move he made was very subtle, but after a few dozen moves, people would suddenly realize that he had already won. Bing was very calm. Such a victory, to him, was very normal. He was more concerned about the performance of the students. There were many reasons why he was transferred to the recruit camp. He was easy to talk to, he was young, etc. But the most important reason was that he was good at training soldiers. Haha, Sima Xiangshan is indeed treacherous. Ling Su's eyes lit up. Crane was expressionless. In their eyes, it is the same. They are even worse than before. These spirit generals, no, they can no longer be called spirit generals. They are the result of many spirit generals forcefully fusing together. That is why they are so deformed. Why do they become spirit generals? It is because their hearts are too unresigned, because their lives are too short, and they have unfulfilled wishes. Every spirit general is the martial artist's most persistent and most cherished wish. Even in death, they do not want to give up. Such a persistent belief should be respected and not be used, trampled on. Sima Xiangshan alone was able to easily settle the battle, causing Liang Qiu, who was an honest person, to be completely dumbstruck. But it was a pity. The vibrating mountain army's counterattack was not as violent as he had imagined, and Bing was slightly regretful. If the vibrating mountain army's counterattack was more ferocious, the baptism of the recruits would be more effective, and many problems would be exposed more thoroughly. When the four of them heard Sima Xiangshan's words, their faces all changed. Forget about the 9 fingers, just the one that was broken was enough to make the master hate them to the core. It was fine if the master died here, but if the master were to return alive, then their future days would definitely be very tragic. You say, if I break 9 of your respected masters, 10 of his fingers, and then return him to you, what are you going to do? You will definitely find a place where there is no one to kill him. Sigh, fighting and killing, it really makes things difficult. Suddenly a palm patted his shoulder, causing Crane to raise his head. The battle shocked everyone. After the completion of the division, he did not say a word, other than the fatal mistakes made by the students. He did not even see the small mistakes. He was observing in the dark, observing the students who performed outstandingly. Little Crane, don't be sad, this kind of trash, all of them will be killed with one spear. People who do not even let off the dead, then let them be dead. Don't worry, we will help you. What made the two of them feel even more inconceivable was that Uncle Bing actually treated it as a training ground. Draco Constellation only had 1 saint and 4 divine dragon martial artists. With such strength, could they handle it? The more advantageous factor was the morale. The rookies' morale was high. Along the way, after digesting the gains from the battle, their strength would increase. But the Lupus Army's Andromeda battle gown, under the eyes of a saint, it would be difficult to display its usefulness. Sima Xiangshan had a stomach full of bad ideas. Long ago when Wang Yi was running frantically, he had already noticed it. When Wang Yi opened his mouth to call for help, he was the first to move. His light body technique was originally exceptional, and quietly appeared beside Wang Yi. At this time, the 4 bodyguards had just moved. What was the strategic significance of taking down Draco Constellation? And what kind of reactions would it cause? Hearing that Ling Su's hair all stood, he opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, This is too perverse. Spirit generals are truly different from poisonous insects. Bing was very satisfied with the battle. He did not expect the vibrating mountain army to appear. But just in case, he still brought Tang Yi's Lupus army to protect the completely new army. When they discovered the vibrating mountain army, Bing's spirit was roused, and he started to plan. Bing thought to himself. Crane's heart warmed, he calmed down. Seems like the vibrating mountain army entering Ursa Major constellation this time should be the doing of the clan union in the dark. Seems like the clan union also wants to fish in troubled waters, and are restless. But since they met us, then they deserve to be unlucky. In the entire process, other than the Lupus army's assault, it gave people a dazzling and sharp feeling. The battle after that was not beautiful at all, to the point that the mechanical army led by Bing was clumsy, continuously making all sorts of mistakes, for example the change in tactics, for example the outflanking was not in place etc., causing the entire battle to look extremely chaotic. and as a military general, they liked to think about the next step in advance. Bing was considering if they should take the chance to kill their way into Draco Constellation. Draco Constellation's army was practically gone, and what was left was roughly the Saints. The four of them were in a dilemma and did not know what to do. Wang Yi was completely scared silly, his face was as white as paper, his mouth was but no sound came out. Spirit generals were formed from martial artists' martial spirits after they died, and thus they would retain the appearance of the living. All spirit generals were like that, and no one had ever heard of such a deformed and ugly spirit general in front of them. Using battle as a substitute for training, this was the method that he had fumbled out in the past. The intensity of the battle at that time was unimaginable today, although the Southern Cross Army had complete reserves, but they still faced the problem of lacking in manpower. The other three spirit generals, although they had different appearances, but they were deformed and ugly, and were all the same. In a short period of time, he had completed the entire battle plan. Such a terrifying military general. Crane sucked in a breath of cold air, and could not help but praise, "So Uncle Bing is actually so powerful." Sima Xiangshan did not care, and said to the four of them, "Surrender, for the sake of your master's life." By controlling the four of them, the entire battle was more or less over. Ling Su's killing intense sword. In truth, he did not want to expose the Sky Martial Wolf Academy and the Mechanical Army so early, but, to reach his requirements with conventional methods, required a very long time. And time, to them, was the most important thing. Wang Ye's four bodyguards shouted with all their might, his heart was filled with fear, he was just a strategist, to let him move his mouth, to come up with some schemes, it was not a problem, with his weak strength, in the chaotic battlefield, to be able to survive until now, was a miracle. Han Bingning's heart trembled, it was her first time seeing such a deformed spirit general. Crane squinted his eyes and said coldly, "Clan Union. I never thought that they would actually become more and more severe." "Wanna run?" A Maori stared and rushed towards the four of them. A strange true power flowed along the sword tip and entered Han Bingning's meridians. Han Bingning snorted, releasing his true power. At the same time, an even more ferocious true power rushed over. There wasn't much that made people's eyes light up. In fact, it was somewhat ordinary. However, when the battlefield was divided into small pieces, people suddenly realized something. Clan Union? Ling Su was at a loss. Crane stared coldly at the four spirit generals in the field, and said indifferently, "Clan Union is a new powerhouse. They are formed by a group of small powerhouses. They have researched a very forbidden technique, and that is the devouring and merging of spirit generals. It is like raising poisonous insects. To obtain stronger poisonous insects, they will place different kinds of poisonous insects together, and let them fight and kill each other, devour each other, and finally nurture the strongest poisonous insect. Clan Union spirit generals are like that." Sima Xiangshan's movements were gentle as he broke one of Wang Ye's fingers. The figures suddenly split apart. Fighting was the best touchstone. The figure beside him flashed past, it was Han Bingning. How much confidence does he need? Wang Yi had already jumped down from the back of the vibrating mountain lizard when the situation was bad. At that time, Long Zhu and the rest did not have the time to care about him, and his luck was good. In such a chaotic situation, he was actually able to escape. But the battle had scared everyone silly, especially Wang Yi. Even Crane and Ling Su, who were standing on the roof of the palace, the two of them looked at the crisscrossing battlefield, saw the Lupus army that appeared out of nowhere, saw Long Zhu's dying counterattack, and saw how Bing easily cut and dismembered the vibrating mountain army. The four bodyguards' faces were ashen. "We surrender." Chapter 441. Crane quietly jumped far away, afraid of disturbing Ling Su. However, awakening the Big Dipper, Bing was also shocked. It did not make sense. Crazy Tang did not even have half a star coin relationship with Big Dipper. How could he awaken Big Dipper? Could it be the desolate bare bone? Crane's face revealed a look of disbelief. This is Ursa Major Constellation's new recognition of a saint treasure. Crazy Tang succeeded. In the past, the 18 stars that formed Ursa Major constellation looked like a big bear squatting down, but currently, the positions of the few stars that formed the head of the bear had shifted upwards, and looking at it, it looked like the big bear was standing up. Especially when Crazy Tang obtained the recognition of Ursa Major constellation. I'm really sorry. The pain of the silver transformation seemed to have disappeared at this moment. He quietly listened to the singing, as if he was listening to a group of proud veterans, narrating their glorious military exploits. They once had another name, a name that had been forgotten for too long, Big Dipper. The current Heaven's Road was completely different from when he was at that time. Ursa Major constellation could only be ranked third in Heaven's Road, and when he first saw it, he was extremely surprised. Because in his era, the Ursa Major constellation had always been one of the traditional tyrants, and even the Southern Cross Army feared them. But now it had fallen to the third tier. How could he not sigh? Although your beliefs, your ideals, are different from mine. I respect you and admire you, but I will not follow your path. Luckily, no one dared to go near him, because the desolate bare bone floating above Tang Tian's head released a fluctuation that only a saint treasure would have. Don't think that Ursa Major constellation was heavily injured, their vitality was greatly affected, but Tang Tian, who held the saint treasure, was definitely not someone ordinary martial artists could provoke. The silver spear seemed to have heard Ling Su's thoughts. The song that entered his ears turned from a low to a resounding and impassioned voice. Ling Su felt as though he was in a battlefield. Countless silver figures rushed left and right. The silver spear flew and the battle was intense. Not to fail. After being forced to stop burning, Xianxia's martial spirit regained its consciousness. The silver spear is like snow, the clouds are pure and untainted. The sound of the sheep horn bell was not heard by the cool breeze. The sun shines but no shadow, the spear is straight. The noble heart, guard my stars. Bing looked at Tang Tian, who had yet to open his eyes, his heart brimming with pride. Such a perfect situation, how could he lose? Ling Su knew that this was an illusion, but the illusion in front of him was so realistic. Every figure was so real. When Ling Su saw it clearly, he was stunned. It was as if he could hear the sound of hoofbeats, as if he could hear the melodious tinkling, as if he could hear the low singing of countless people. The voice was brimming with confidence. He could hear the deep pride in the deep voice. Between the desolate bare bone and Big Dipper, there was a faint connection. The rookie student group and Tang Yi's Lupus army directly turned and headed towards Draco constellation, madly rushing all the way. In ancient times, any martial technique that dared to use the name star was an incomparably powerful martial technique. For example, Aries constellation's Aries Spear of Stars was a top-grade inheritance. Maybe in other people's eyes, the Ursa Major constellation in Yen Yonglai's era was already relatively powerful, but they did not know how powerful Ursa Major constellation was in the past. Even the citizens of Ursa Major constellation had long forgotten the glory of the past. To them, it was too far away. With Ursa Major constellation, Draco constellation no longer had any meaning, and Bing immediately decided to give up on attacking Draco constellation. But, although he did not plan to attack Draco constellation, Bing did not plan to let them go. This inheritance has landed in my hands, and I will carry it forward, a path that is different from yours, although it is stubborn, although it is crazy, but it is a path that belongs to me, Ling Su. The decline of Ursa Major constellation was directly related to the dimming of the Big Dipper. Ursa Major constellation's top-grade inheritance, Ursa Major star's umbrella, was a martial technique developed from the Big Dipper. Who knew that the Ursa Major star's umbrella would be lost so quickly and later evolved into the incomplete Big Dipper? Who knew that even Big Dipper would be lost? Big Dipper was the true strength of Ursa Major constellation, and the awakened Big Dipper would quickly become even stronger. What made him even more excited was that he suspected that the true inheritance of Ursa Major constellation, Ursa Major star's umbrella, was sealed inside the desolate bare bone. Where are they going? Ling Su was surprised. Bing was not surprised that Tang Tian was able to sort out the star power of Ursa Major constellation and set up the Saint Treasure. Tang Tian's body contained close to a third of Ursa Major constellation's star power, and that was enough for him to fight against Yen Yong Lai. And he knew that the constellations also had some sort of self-preservation instinct. Combustion was self-destruction. The constellations themselves did not have consciousness, but everything in the world had a natural resistance towards self-destruction. Any tyrant needed to have a tyrant's foundation. Compared to Aries' constellation, although it had declined, but a skinny camel was still bigger than a horse. For Ursa Major constellation to be able to dominate a region in the past, naturally it had its foundation, and that was the most dazzling 7 stars in the sky. The change in star power, the movement of the stars, all these rare phenomena, caused everyone to be stunned. Silver frost mounts. Because I will definitely be stronger than all of you. Desolate bare bone. An unexpected joy. It was definitely an unexpected joy. Bing could not wait to pull Crazy Tang over and carefully study the golden bone. Ling Su could not help but hold onto the silver spear in his hand tightly. The movement of the entire constellation's star power, that vast and majestic scene, always made people feel small. Everyone pay attention. Our target is Draco constellation, full speed ahead. Ursa Major constellation immediately became extremely alluring and delicious. Crane seemed to be deep in thought and revealed a harmless smile. Such a good opportunity, Uncle Bing will definitely not give it up. Speaking of which, in this period of time, I seem to have forced him too much. Losing the call of the top-grade martial artists, the Big Dipper 7 stars finally dimmed down and went into deep slumber. That was the root cause of Ursa Major constellation's decline. It better be a powerful one. Ling Su snorted. He sat cross-legged, placed the silver spear horizontally on his legs, and closed his eyes to rest. At that time, someone would quickly come out with their claws and teeth. There was no need to pay the price for losing a battle. Bing raised his head, his poker face cold, his gaze fixated on the 7 most dazzling stars of Ursa Major constellation. Tang Tian had activated the star power of the entire constellation. Such a scene had long caused the fighting intent in Ling Su's body to surge, and he could not wait to find someone to fight. Are you guys showing me? The heroic spirit in his chest was churning. He was unable to calm his heart down, so he did not bother about it. The sheep horn wind bells seemed to have sensed the fighting intent in his body, and rang out. The silver frost mount's war song involuntarily resonated in his heart. Aries' spear of stars, a completely different kind of Aries spear of stars. He was definitely not the only one who knew about the Big Dipper. Anyone who had studied the history of the Ursa Major constellation would definitely be able to deduce that the Ursa Major constellation would quickly enter a period of rapid growth. A fully grown Ursa Major constellation would definitely have an extremely high energy concentration. Such a preposterous thing actually happened. Ursa Major constellation was going to be called Crazy Bear in the future. Crazy Bear martial artist. What a terrifying title. The Big Dipper. When this thought popped out, Bing's eyes immediately lit up. Bing became excited. I lost. I'm sorry. In the sky above, the dim Ursa Major constellation, a star on its back suddenly lit up with light aura. Following that, the neighboring stars lit up, and from the back to the tail, one after another, the stars lit up. 7 stars formed a bright spoon. Intense star power spewed out from the 7 stars. The spoon slowly spun, causing the Ursa Major constellation to undergo an astonishing change. The positions of the stars quietly changed. That was what a man should do. Although Angelina held onto the fairy hoop, but her own strength was limited, and the fairy hoop's power in her hands was not even 10%. But Tang Tian's own strength was tyrannical, and with the saint treasure in his hands, that was relatively terrifying. This is for a constellation to change a saint treasure. In the history of Heaven's Road, there were precedents. But, for it to happen in front of him, Crane was still surprised. He closed his eyes, and carefully felt the undulations in the air, and after a while, he finally realized, it truly was the desolate bare bone. I was not able to persevere until you guys won. You guys are definitely still fighting, right? If I die, you guys will have to live on in defeat. but I am not able to shoulder the defeat and humiliation with you guys. Crazy Tang's self-confidence was unparalleled. He was the #1 stalker. His potential was bottomless. Even when Yin Yonglai was alive, Bing did not think King Bear would win, and furthermore, he was currently in the state of martial spirit ignition. Ling Su was at a loss. He did not understand, Crane did not explain further, and smiled. We just have to protect Crazy Tang. But Bing quickly calmed down. As a commander, his strategic foresight far surpassed others. The Big Dipper 7 stars being awakened was naturally a good thing, but it would definitely cause a chain reaction. The light pillar disappeared, and in front of Tang Tian floated a fuzzy martial spirit. On its head floated a dim bear head crown that was the previous saint treasure of Ursa Major constellation, King Bear Head. The light pillar that shot into the sky from the palace suddenly collapsed, converging into a dazzling gold light floating above Tang Tian's head. Only Crane and Ling Su who were close to it could clearly see the gold light was a golden bone. The surging and vast star power, with the desolate bear bone as the center, lingered without dispersing. The undulation that was different from the King Bear Head was transmitted to every corner of Ursa Major constellation. For some reason, Ling Su's agitated state of mind calmed down. Furthermore, even without the Ursa Major star's umbrella, Big Dipper was still relatively strong. A gust of wind blew past, the fuzzy martial spirit and the dim King Bear Head transformed into ashes, dissipating in the air without a trace. Crane noticed Ling Su's change, his face revealing a look of surprise, then a look of helplessness. As expected, all of them were unreliable fellows. To gain enlightenment while protecting. Can you be more of a scapegoat for your teammates? When the constellation stopped changing, the congealed star power suddenly seemed to have thawed and became extremely lively. The energy in the air, compared to before, although it was much thinner, it was filled with vitality. But, please believe me, no matter what, I will not disgrace it. Crane and Ling Su were alarmed by the movements of the army. Chapter 442. But Crane's state of mind finally relaxed. With Crazy Tang's current strength, with the saint treasure in his hand, it would not be easy for any saint to have any ideas on him. His state of mind relaxed, fatigue surged towards him like a tide, he leaned on the wall and fell into a deep sleep. Liang Feng initially did not want to care about the matter. If there was only one army, he might still have a chance. But surprise and awe caused Liang Feng's attitude to quietly change. Liang Feng also laughed. That's true. If you have any requests, why don't you say it, and we can discuss it? But he did not have any intention to fight. As the only saint of Draco constellation, his position was extremely high. Even Dragon King Tianlong could not forcefully order him. If not for the fact that his relationship with Dragon King Tianlong was not bad, he would not even agree to it. When the 4 constellations merged into one, the effect produced was definitely terrifying. An indescribable undulation came out from the desolate bare bone in his hands, and Tang Tian felt that it was extremely familiar. Liang Feng was filled with curiosity towards the military general in front of him, and towards Tang Tian. The godlike young lad, Tang Tian, was said to be only 17 to 18 years old, and had a group of young geniuses by his side. All of them were young, but had astonishing talent. The sensitivity of a saint to the battle environment was something that ordinary martial artists could never imagine. The blue mechanical spirit weapon came out from the crowd. The position it stopped at, in Liang Feng's eyes, revealed a lot of information. Of course, there might be a genius military general with exceptional talent, but to Liang Feng, it was not a good thing. To make the army stop, such a reputation was good, and it was enough to prove that the opponent was afraid of his saint-level strength. But the agreement of defeat was not a good reputation, and he would not fall into it. Lupus Army, the sudden rise of the army, was seen as a cannon fodder by countless people, but they had won consecutive battles, and were not to be underestimated. Liang Feng naturally would not look down on them, although he was not a military general, but his sensitivity to qi and qi was much stronger than ordinary military generals. This small army of a few hundred people, their qi was 1, and had very few flaws. On the other hand, The large mechanical army, although they had many people and could barely maintain their chi as one, but there were still many messy flaws. This bone, isn't it broken? Tang Tian did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Riding on the momentum of his victory, he killed his way over. The astral energy in his body was still surging, but it was not as violent as before. It seemed to have been tamed. Yes, I think he will wake up soon. Crane replied. He raised his head to look at the Ursa Major constellation in the sky, which was gradually disappearing. The Ursa Major constellation's Big Dipper was still much brighter than the other stars. Liang Feng knew that the other party was demanding an exorbitant price, but he also understood that this was normal. 10 days, I will only give them 10 days. If they do not agree, then we can only go and get it ourselves. Bing's tone was as sincere as an old friend. This is completely because of Brother Liang's face. 15 days, we only need 15 days, and we can definitely occupy Draco constellation. We can take this wealth for ourselves. I've always been good at plundering. As for Draco constellation, we do not have much use for it. I can sell it. Draco constellation is after all one of the 5 polar domains. I think it can be sold for a good price. Immortal Martial, Leo constellation, they should all be interested. That's 2 incomes, 1 in and 1 out. But the more he calculated, the more cautious and cold Liang Feng's heart became. He was surprised to find out that he still did not have enough confidence. His calculations were very vague, and victory or defeat was just a thin line. Traps were not absolute, experts swallowing the bait and spitting out the hook, that was a common thing. And this sort of thing was extremely common to saints. Because ordinary military leaders were unable to understand the strength of saints, and when they were setting up traps, it was easy to have weaknesses and loopholes. All these minute loopholes, to saints, were usually enough. Such a genius, oh no, such a greedy idea, how did he think of it? If it was just the mechanical army, he had enough confidence, but with the addition of the lupus army, the danger level of the battle would rise exponentially. As expected, in less than an hour, Draco Constellation sent a reply. They agreed to Bing's conditions, but they also raised a new condition. His gaze swept across the 2 armies in front of him countless times. The huge mechanical army did not make his gaze stop for long. But the lupus army, which was much smaller in numbers, caused his pupils to constrict. Tang Tian, who was walking around, immediately lightened his footsteps. Seeing Crane in such a state, his heart warmed. To everyone, the battle was extremely difficult. But he suppressed the restlessness in his heart and calmed down. Only then did he realize, although the opponent seemed to have left the formation, but his chi did not leave the army behind him, but seemed to be separated yet not separated. After Tang Tian came to this conclusion, he immediately smiled. Suddenly, his gaze swept across Ling Su, and could not help but exclaim, Ling Su is comprehending. And Tang Tian's side had set a deadline of 10 days, was to snatch the juiciest piece before the wolves pounced on them. If he took action himself, what were the chances of winning? From the opponent's tone, Liang Feng could tell, the opponent did not seem to have the intention of swallowing Draco Constellation. As long as the opponent was willing to talk, then it was fine. 700 m away, just outside of his attack range. Liang Feng said calmly, his heart slightly regretting agreeing to the matter. As a saint, when had he ever lowered his voice to speak to others? Me? Tang Tian was startled by Crane's words, and only reacted after a while. Just at that moment, a golden bone floated in front of him, and Tang Tian subconsciously extended his hand to catch it. Liang Feng had decided that once the matter was settled, he would leave Draco Constellation. The opponent's blade was extremely ruthless, causing Draco Constellation's vitality to be greatly injured. Losing the protection of the vibrating mountain army, and losing a lot of blood, Draco Constellation would immediately attract a group of greedy people. Is this guy really a military general? Since when did military generals become so shameless like businessmen? Big Dipper 7 stars, the Big Dipper 7 stars that have been sleeping for so long have been awakened. I am really looking forward to it. This matter, using such an excuse, is not good. A teasing voice came out from the blue mechanical spirit weapon. Liang Feng regained his senses after a moment, and laughed. What did the benefits of Draco Constellation have to do with me? He had only come out to give Draco Constellation a chance to mediate. As for other matters, he did not plan to interfere. An exquisite blue mechanical spirit weapon flew out from the crowd and stopped about 700 m away from him. A new tyrant, is he about to be born? Liang Feng looked at the two armies in front of him and sighed in his heart. The defeat of the vibrating mountain army had already spread back to Draco Constellation. The current Draco Constellation, from top to bottom, had sunk into unprecedented chaos and panic. The vibrating mountain army was Draco Constellation's strongest army. The other armies had terrible standards and were unable to be entrusted with heavy responsibilities. Liang Feng was familiar with the higher-ups of Draco Constellation. He knew that although the conditions seemed harsh, but Draco Constellation would most likely choose to accept them. All of them were cowards, without any unyielding spirit. Struggling at death's door to them was the most normal choice. Bing was not surprised by Liang Feng's attitude. As long as Liang Feng was not stupid, he would not send himself to death for Draco Constellation. Desolate bare bone. They hoped to obtain Tang Tian's protection. As long as they won. Ursa Major Constellation, Draco Constellation, Andromeda Constellation, Lupus Constellation, Ursa Major Constellation that was awakened by Big Dipper, Draco Constellation with a solid foundation, Andromeda Constellation with a flourishing business, and Lupus Constellation with a large population. Tang Tian calmed down. He was not injured, everyone was fine, the light pillar was gone, Ursa Major Constellation had returned to normal. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he had won. Liang Feng's mind immediately surfaced this word, using the main general as bait, was a common tactic used by armies to deal with high-level martial artists. But with the confidence of a saint, Liang Feng did not immediately retreat, his mind quickly calculating. The current Draco Constellation, without the protection of the vibrating mountain army, was like a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Tang Tian could no longer remember what exactly happened at that time. For the sake of assimilating the combusting star power, it was as though he was in a furnace and was in a muddle-headed state. Shrewd and ruthless. Long Zhu secretly sent out his troops. The entire Draco Constellation is extremely shocked. I hope your side can believe that Draco Constellation does not have any ambitions towards Ursa Major Constellation. The vibrating mountain army's attack is completely Long Zhu's personal actions. He suddenly realized a terrifying thing. If the alliance agreement could be formed. A misconception rose in his mind. As long as he put in a bit more strength, he could kill the opponent in one strike. To kill the main general of an army, this thought was extremely alluring. Even Liang Feng in that moment was moved. Draco Constellation. The opponent had an extremely clear and profound understanding of the strength of a saint. This seemingly normal deduction caused Liang Feng to be cautious. Before the conflict between Leo Constellation and the Honorable Martial Alliance, the entire Heaven's Road had been peaceful for too long. The confrontation between an army and a saint had never been heard of for 10 years. The strength of a saint was in the realm, in the spirit domain. Without personally experiencing it, it was hard to grasp it clearly. Tang Tian opened his eyes in a daze. Looking around, he exclaimed out loud, with a face of confusion, "It's over?" Liang Feng's heart trembled. Only the big powerhouses would give military generals such an opportunity to prevent them from being defeated when facing a saint. On account of Brother Liang's face. 300 billion star coins as compensation, 10 8th-level vibrating mountain beasts, 2 gold star treasures, 10 unique spirit cards, 400 tons of dragon crystal spirit core ores. Oh, I refuse to bargain. Crane, who was resting with his eyes closed, felt helpless, as expected of an unreliable fellow, but he still said warmly, "If you're done, then it's done." Liang Feng was stunned by Bing's words, "Occupy the constellation and then sell it." Liang Feng was surprised. Seems like the higher-ups of Draco Constellation were not all good for nothing to be able to think of such a method. Rather than being dismembered, why not take the initiative to join them? Liang Feng smiled. "I am indebted to your esteemed self for thinking highly of me." Liang Feng is extremely honored, but I am just a messenger. Your conditions have already been sent back to the palace. Please wait for a moment, I believe they will give a reply. Chapter 443. Qiu Zhijun had a look of helplessness. Even the alliance between Lupus constellation and Andromeda constellation did not attract much attention. Andromeda constellation's vitality was greatly damaged, most of the star doors were lost, and there were internal and external troubles. Furthermore, Andromeda constellation belonged to the Northern Sky constellation, the fourth grade constellation. Andromeda constellation and Lupus constellation's alliance, in the eyes of the big shots of Heaven's Road, was just a small village in a remote and desolate ravine forming an alliance with a neighboring small town. It did not affect the big picture. The strategists from all sides were calculating the changes in the situation, but no one had expected the changes to be so shocking. If you were to go against the Lupus army, how confident are you? Sima Xiao looked at Rong De seriously. Milord, De Rong said in a low voice. Even though he was facing his milord, his expression was still grave and stern. In next to no time, the latest news caused everyone to feel that it was even more unbelievable. Resetting the sacred treasure, the awakening of the Big Dipper. All of this was like the stories in those legendary novels, so bizarre. The immortal Martial constellation was formed by the merging of two polar constellations, and because of its unique intelligence-gathering capabilities, it became a powerful force that could rival the 12 ecliptic palaces. An image lit up in front of him. When he took the report, his expression changed drastically. Rong De's gaze was firmly attracted by the image in front of him. Gradually, his expression turned grave. Sima Xiao was surprised. Aren't you afraid of dying? When Draco Constellation's vibrating mountain army entered Ursa Major Constellation, they met with Tang Tian's army and were completely wiped out. When the Lupus army surfaced, everyone finally understood that star treasures could actually be created by humans. As soon as the news came out, many people could not sit still anymore. Ursa Major Constellation changed owners at lightning speed. Rongda had an ugly appearance. He was already 56 years old this year, and he'd lived a life of failure for a long time, causing him to grow rather old. The dense bitterness between his brows coupled with the coldness emitted from his entire body caused him to be unable to help but give others the impression of being stubborn and arrogant. Fight. Sima Xiao raised his head and said seriously. It was not that it had never happened before for a constellation to rejudge a saint treasure, but it was rather rare. Big Dipper's awakening shocked the strategists who were familiar with history. Rong De calmly said, "There's no difference. In any case, I've already sold my life to you." Hearing this name, Rong De's cold face softened. She's much better. Her body is stronger than before. She hasn't fallen sick in the past 6 months. I haven't thanked you yet. The Lupus army that was equipped with the strongest Andromeda star treasures, the gigantic mechanical army, immediately became the hottest topic. The formation of star treasures could not be controlled, and that had always been the biggest shackle that hindered the development of the army. There was actually an army that was equipped with the same star treasure, a snake swallowing an elephant. Rongda said coldly, "I know, that's why I can't beat him." Sima Zhao's face revealed a look of surprise. Other famed generals all fight with numbers. How can you be so unambitious, to open your mouth and say that you have the advantage in numbers? Hey, I am still an adult, will you die if you give me some face? Sima Xiao said unhappily. According to common sense, any constellation that reappraised a saint treasure would have to enter a long recovery period. The abnormal phenomenon of Ursa Major constellation made everyone's gaze once again land on the mysterious Big Dipper. A look of fanaticism surfaced on Rongda's face. Lupus army, compared to our army, is actually weaker. And the might of their assault had obviously far exceeded the standard of their army. The only possibility was that the other party's general was involved. Wushuang, it can only be Wushuang. In such a short period of time, the star power concentration had recovered to 12%, that meant that Ursa Major constellation had stabilized and was quickly recovering. The speed of recovery caused people to be dumbstruck. In a few days, it had suddenly soared from 7% to 12%, and the momentum of the increase did not show any signs of stopping. And Big Dipper was the spirit of the violent bear. Draco constellation had officially announced that they were joining Ursa Major constellation. Sima Xiao waved his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I saved your daughter, just so that you can work for me. No one owes anyone anything. I am a person who does not like to talk about favors. Everyone should talk about benefits. 500 against 500, we will definitely lose. Give me 1,000 men, and we will win 30%. 2,000 men, and we will win 50%. 5,000 men, and we will definitely win." Rongda said. "It is impossible for us to have 5,000 men." Sima Xiao waved his hand. If there truly was a new immortal martial powerhouse that rose up, it would affect the entire situation in Heaven's Road. Rongda turned and left. This video is the complete process of the destruction of the vibrating mountain army. Qiu Zhijun said quietly, "Because it involves an army's battle, we feel that you are more professional, so we want to hear your thoughts." It might seem that the data was not strange, but when Ursa Major constellation changed masters, the energy concentration of Ursa Major constellation was only 7%. "What about the other mechanical army?" Qiu Zhijun asked. Rongda nodded his head with a face of arrogance. "That's true. Very strong." Rongda subconsciously clenched his fists tightly, his expression sinister. After a while, he released his fists, his expression calmed down and said, "Stronger than us." "I think so too." Sima Xiao seemed to have expected such an answer. His face did not have any dejection. He raised his eyebrows. "Come, tell me about it." Rongda looked at Sima Xiao in disdain. "You don't understand. If I am not wrong, the other party's General Wu Shuang is most likely the vanguard, and his commanding ability is definitely not high. They are like a blade, sharp enough. But they only have so many people, and do not have enough strength. To deal with such an opponent, we need to grind them down." Sima Xiao placed down the pastries in his hand. "If I did not call for you, I would not even have seen your shadow. How is Xiaoyu?" Rongda straightforwardly replied, "Good." Orion constellation was the traditional ally of Leo constellation, and its own strength, in the 10 equatorial palace halls, was the peak. And the other crucial point was Orion constellation's position. Rongda did not ask why, but asked after thinking, "How many people do you want to give me?" As expected, very quickly, the well-informed powerhouses received the newest energy concentration of Ursa Major constellation, 12%. This number was not considered high, and in truth, compared to the previous Ursa Major constellation, it was slightly lower. In Yen Yong Lai's era, Ursa Major constellation's energy concentration was around 15%. Compared to them, Ursa Major constellation was undoubtedly a colossus. It was a tyrant that had the qualifications to compete with the equatorial palace halls constellations. "How many people do you need?" Sima Xiao asked. The fairy weaving treasures became famous. "That's true." Sima Xiao tilted his head and scratched his chin, "But I am a person who values my personal wealth and cannot squander it." Energy concentration, also known as star power concentration, was the most crucial standard to judge a constellation's grade. But the real heavy bomb exploded 2 days later with a loud bang. "Wu Shuang?" The smile on Sima Xiao's face disappeared. The video quickly ended. Suddenly, his gaze was attracted by a messenger rushing over. He had a premonition that something big was about to happen. Ursa Major Constellation's alliance with the Honorable Martial Alliance to launch a sneak attack on Orion Constellation had attracted the attention of the entire Heaven's Road. And after that, Andromeda Constellation announced that they were joining Ursa Major Constellation. Sima Xiao, who was burying his head in his food, suddenly revealed a smile and raised the pastries in his hand. "Do you want some?" The glory and strength of Ursa Major Constellation in the past could only be found in historical records. Many of the historical records, when describing the strength of the ancient Ursa Major Constellation, would often use the phrase, "the violent bear that caused people to tremble." Before everyone could digest the shocking snake-swallowing elephant, the following battle report caused everyone to be speechless again. Only after a long time did he regain his senses. Look at this video. Sima Xiao finished his last piece of pastries, patted the crumbs in his hand and stood up. The various powerhouses in Heaven's Road were all dumbstruck by the series of explosions. These small powerhouses were like grains of sand in the Ganges River in Heaven's Road. There were countless of them, and could not even be seen. Rongda was not moved and said coldly, "This subordinate is busy with military affairs. If master does not have anything, this subordinate will take his leave." Rongda acted as though he did not hear anything, and was as cold as a statue. When Draco Constellation announced that they were joining Ursa Major Constellation, everyone could not help but think about immortal Marshall. Xiao Yu was his daughter, and had contracted a strange disease in the past, and was in a critical situation. If not for Sima Xiao, he would have died. Truly unconvinced. Sima Xiao was filled with unwillingness. "Go back and pack up your army, prepare to move out. The enemy's military leader is extremely strong." Rongda had already calmed down and said, "The Lupus army's assault is most likely of the Wu Shuang grade." As the Leo constellation and Orion constellation had a close relationship, there were many star doors between them. Once Ursa Major constellation took over Orion constellation, that meant that they could directly threaten the Leo constellation. It was easy to imagine that once they took over Orion constellation, the Honorable Martial Alliance would not hesitate to pay any price, and forge it into a sharp blade at the back of Leo constellation. And the one benefiting from it was called Tang Tian. "Are we going to fight or not?" Rongda was slightly impatient. Tang Tian was a name that everyone was familiar with. The Battle of Lupus Constellation had made everyone remember this young man who was still young and inexperienced. But Lupus Constellation's position in Heaven's Road was truly too low. Ecliptic palaces, equatorial palaces, polar grounds, northern sky, southern sky. Lupus Constellation belonged to the 5th-tier constellation and was the lowest-ranked constellation. Adding that Tang Tian did not obtain the Saint Treasure of Lupus Constellation, to many people, Tang Tian's group was actually just a group of bandits with a bit of strength. And the gigantic mechanical army was similarly attracting people's attention. The mechanical army that had disappeared for a long time once again stepped onto the battlefield. The gigantic metal figures were finally no longer playthings, but had become metal fierce beasts on the battlefield. Rongda frowned and said unhappily, "How can such sweet food be eaten by a man?" Sima Xiao was not angry and laughed. "Rongda, you really do not know how to enjoy yourself." Rongda was startled and speechless. The scene from before was still flashing past his mind. He was like a puppet, standing at his original position, not moving at all. Tang Tian, this little snake, actually swallowed Ursa Major constellation in one bite. Everyone simultaneously thought of another colossus, the immortal martial arts. Rongda muttered, "Proficient in training recruits, his level of planning is very high, and his rhythm is not bad. As for other things, I can't see much." Sima Xiao was startled for a moment, then shouted from behind, Hey, I never said we were going to fight Ursa Major constellation. Our goal is..." "How is it? Evaluate it." Sima Zhao's leisurely voice entered his ears. To the knowledgeable people of the various powerhouses, the Battle of Orion constellation could possibly be the turning point of the entire war. Could it be another immortal martial? How strong would Ursa Major constellation that was lit up by Big Dipper become? Chapter 444. The cold wind swept up a leaf, blowing past Adrian's body, causing him to be dumbstruck. The discussions outside were everywhere, but Tang Tian and the rest did not have the time to care. Everyone was extremely busy. When Hua Air and the rest received the order, their eyes immediately turned green, 13% star power concentration, and it was still rising. What was the star power concentration of Lupus constellation? 1%. "I do not know at the moment." Adrian said, "These alliance generals are not the strongest in the clan union." Looking at the vast and mighty group of people, Hua Air's nose suddenly turned sour, her eyes turning red. These people were extremely unhappy with Tang Tian's entry and displayed a rather repulsive attitude. They were even more proficient in handling ingredients, how to cook delicacies, how to concoct good wine, Their fighting strength on the battlefield was almost zero. They were the cheapest cannon fodder in Heaven's Road. Their dignity in death was only worth a few 100-star coins. Now that they were suddenly told that they could enter Ursa Major constellation to settle down, it was like being smashed by a huge pie. "Do you know what to do?" Black Wolf Great Clan Elder said coldly. "We need to work hard and improve to set off the incompetence and laziness of those fools." Crane saw that when Adrian heard that, he stopped in his tracks and reminded him helplessly, "Didn't you ask him to go interrogate Wang Yi?" Adrian felt that he had seen much of the world and was a quick-witted old man, but he realized he could not keep up with Tang Tian's thoughts and rhythm. To mix in with Tang Tian's side and pretend to be a helper, to be captured as a captive, so be it. Now to ask him to interrogate a new captive. There was no one in front of him. Crane stood up and nodded his head to Adrian. "I have something to do, I will take my leave first." The various tribes were mobilizing for the last time. All the virtuous and respectable clan elders were all screaming at the top of their lungs, spitting saliva in front of their own clansmen. The martial artists of Ursa Major constellation Yen Yonglai's generation were all coming out in full force. And all the aristocratic families, all threw themselves into Orion constellation. The remaining were mostly martial artists who did not have high fighting strength, although their realms were not low, but the martial techniques they trained in were not for fighting, but for production and living. The cultured and refined great clan elder of the Ice Wolf tribe said earnestly, "Such an opportunity, in Lupus constellation, has never happened before. Each and every one of you is the luckiest person alive. However, I hope that you will not forget your mission. Your performance in Ursa Major constellation is directly related to the future rise and fall of our tribe, directly related to Master Lupus King's impression of our Lupus race." Tang Tian actually asked him to interrogate the captives. "That's not how conspiracies are played, okay? If you want to subdue me, you should make friends with me. At the very least, you should say, 'Untie me. I'm a captive.' How can you be so righteous as to ask me to interrogate a captive?" Adrian walked over expressionlessly. Adrian said expressionlessly, "The leader of the operation against the Ursa Major constellation is called Sima Xiao." Sima Xiao was the youngest clan elder in the clan union. His way of doing things was strange and unpredictable, and had a strong influence in the clan union. These spirit generals were called alliance generals. The union generals had appeared very early on, but the clan union was not focused enough, until Sima Xiao pushed them in the dark, and they finally researched on the method to continuously devour. The strength of the alliance generals rose greatly. Adrian looked at the prison cell in front of him with a complicated expression. His Majesty Lupus King was truly too powerful to take out such a fertile land, and did not forget about them who were in poverty. Crane was surprised. "Don't tell me the clan union has ulterior motives towards Ursa Major constellation?" Oh, I remember now." Tang Tian slapped his forehead and said happily, "I feel that although he is not as smart as me, but he should be able to deal with Wang Yi." With that, he soared into the sky. Like a confident and unrestrained big black crane, he disappeared. Just what was in this guy's head? The elder with the bad temper from the Flame Wolf tribe roared, "All of you better be tensed up. I will say the ugly words first. All of you going to Ursa Major constellation is not to enjoy life, but to suffer. All of you have to work even harder than here. No one knows if there will be another chance like this in the future. Whoever dares to drag us down, I will break their legs." For a constellation like Ursa Major constellation, the conditions to settle down were extremely harsh. Other than the local martial artists, if other martial artists wanted to stay, they would have to pay a high amount of the so-called star power usage fee every month. This fee, to the poor Lupus martial artists, was definitely an astronomical figure. In the dilapidated palace of Ursa Major constellation, Tang Tian and a few others were studying the spirit generals of the clan union. Seeing Ling Su alone, facing 4 spirit generals, it was an explosive scene. The sinister and cunning great clan elder of the Black Wolf tribe said without batting an eyelid, "Ursa Major constellation is a group of idiots. They truly have no limits. At this time, they still dare to show their face to the master. Hee hee, this is our chance." Don't tell me they already have a new target? Crane was moved. The kind-hearted Crane took the initiative. I wonder what did Mr. Hunter gain? It's my turn to try. Tang Tian was eager to try. Suddenly, the horn sound on Crane's wrist trembled slightly. Horn sound was formed from many triangles and was a common star treasure of Triangulum constellation used for long-distance communication. Her face blossomed into a sincere smile. Suddenly she thought about the first time she met the young man and the rest, thinking about the fate of the Lupus people, to be changed by that one encounter. She was truly fortunate. What chance? Clan Elder! Someone shouted from below. A grand and spectacular Lupus constellation great martial competition was about to begin. What is he doing here? Tang Tian was surprised. Without saying a word, Tang Tian agreed. Of course, he naturally threw the matter to Crane. Interesting. Tang Tian looked as though he had seen something fun. His eyes lit up. His fighting strength is very strong. Completely unlike the other spirit generals, he is very agile and full of killing intent. The star power concentration of Ursa Major constellation had already risen to 13%. Such a concentration, although Ursa Major constellation was heavily injured, it was still full of vitality. Crane immediately passed down the order to Hua Air. Considering Ursa Major constellation's ability to endure, he gave her a quota of 1 million. Fighting was always a specialized skill that required long periods of training to be able to comprehend. He looked up into the sky, lost in thought. After a long while, he lowered his head and quietly walked towards the prison. No one cared about him. Yes, in terms of fighting strength, they are extremely strong. They have an instinctive reaction to fighting and are extremely vicious. Crane's face did not conceal the disgust. No one came to bring him to the prison. No one had any reaction to his interrogation. No one told him if he was going to live or die. No one told him what to do next. The faces in front of him were brimming with hope and yearning for the future. The light aura in their eyes was called hope. Hua Air did not expect such a situation. After that, someone called for a martial competition, and the quota would be decided according to the results. Adrian said expressionlessly, "That does not seem to be the case. The orders that Wang Yi received had a lot of content that is directed at you. For example, to gather information on you and observe the strength of your armies. Wang Ye's other mission is to infiltrate Draco constellation. But from the looks of it, they do not have any plans to take over Draco constellation, including Ursa Major constellation. This is very strange. Until now, the clan union is formed by a few small families, and their living environment is not good. A higher level constellation, to them, means a lot. For many years, Lupus constellation had always been the poorest and most barren place in Heaven's Road. The martial artists here lived a life where they could not even fill their stomachs, and their lives were extremely short. Their faces were forever cruel and cold. They were a group of hungry wolves. Not only did they have to fight with the heavens and earth, they had to fight with their own kind. Woo! The young men were extremely excited. Mr. Hunter is here. Crane saw a figure walking over and reminded Tang Tian. Tang Tian, who could not hold it in any longer, howled, rushed into the field, and snatched 2 alliance generals from Ling Su's hands and started to fight. The huge group was like a torrent, heading towards the direction of hope, rumbling forward. We have the chance to kick them out. The Black Wolf, Great Wolf, chuckled and said, "Think about it. Those fools were watching coldly from the sidelines while you guys performed very well. You were very hardworking and not afraid of death." When the Wolf King saw this, he thought, the Jackal tribe is still the most reliable. And then? His Majesty Wolf King thought about it. With such a small number of people, it is not enough. At that time, your brothers and sisters will have the chance. Hua Air and the rest moved. He had to prepare to settle down so many people. It was a complicated matter. In the entire Lupus constellation, all the big and small tribes gathered at Hua Air's side. The group of old fellows were all excited, spittle flying everywhere, and quarreling incessantly. Crane quickly realized he had no one to use. Crane, let's go. 13% star power concentration, that was like bathing in the star power. Such a place was something they did not even dare to dream of. Even martial artists like Huama, who had gone out to explore before, could not help but be excited. He noticed that Adrian's footsteps were sluggish, and his heart immediately sympathized with him. Adrian completely did not know how to describe his own feelings. Lupus constellation was all boiling. After an hour, he came out of the prison cell. Many people's eyes lit up. The Lupus race's families were usually big, who did not have brothers and sisters. And recently, the Fairy Commerce Alliance had been transporting food into Lupus constellation, causing the prices to drop by a lot, and everyone's lives had improved. The Lupus race's strong reproduction ability immediately manifested, and many people had younger brothers and sisters in the past 2 years. Crane's deadline was very short, and Huama was extremely busy, but her face was always brimming with smiles. When the curtains of the competition came down, the candidates were finally decided. 13% energy concentration, that was something that Lupus constellation did not even dare to think about, and the Lupus martial artists had to break their heads to get it. It was as if he was forgotten. Facing such a situation, Crane suggested to Tang Tian to move the martial artists from Lupus constellation over. Tang Tian thought about it. The martial artists of Ursa Major constellation did not like him. If they did not like him, then they did not like him, no one else. Did Lupus constellation still lack people? Chapter 445. Crane had yet to return. Bing was stationed at Draco constellation. Even Huama was at Lupus constellation. Tang Tian was stunned to realize that there was no one around him. Oh, there was one more. Tang Tian felt as though his head was about to explode. All of his subordinates were looking at him. All of them were the first batch of Lupus martial artists to arrive, and they all took up the responsibility of managing Tang Tian. Quickly invite him in. Tang Tian smiled. All of his worries were temporarily thrown to the side. What kind of expectations did it place on Tang Tian? He was familiar with history, and every time a chaotic era came, the saint level would always surge. The envoy from Aquila constellation has sent over an invitation. He felt that it was inconceivable. He had never heard of any saint treasure that would help its owner so much. Tang Tian. But Xiao Juzi said anxiously. I knew hand towel would be a happy hand towel. Tang Tian cut Long Shou Jing without hesitation and turned to face the surrounding Lupus martial artists. Hey, if you have any questions, ask him. 27%. Of course, that was not what truly surprised him. With his saint-level strength, even the 12 ecliptic palaces would treat him as a guest. Just that, to him now, raising the concentration of star power did not have any substantial help. Any new powerhouse would always have a stronger thirst for talent than those stable powerhouses. Hidden in his sleeves was a silver plate the size of a coin. In the next moment, he lowered his head to take a look, a light aura flashing past his eyes. Such a tyrant, how could he be neglected? Oh, I have to think of a way to plunder more. In the end, all of the responsibilities landed on the 4th-ranked Prince Shou Jing. 300 billion star coins, 10 8th-level vibrating mountain beasts, 2 gold-ranked treasures, 10 unique spirit cards, 400 tons of dragon crystal spirit core ores. Furthermore, he was not alone. He had his own family, his own disciples. The godlike young lad's name was currently like the sun in the sky. Tang Tian had too many miracles on him. He was like a mystery formed from miracles. Tang Tian had become the center of Ursa Major constellation's star power. Long Shou Jing was also secretly sizing up Tang Tian. What if we join the Honorable Martial Alliance? The girl asked, unwilling to give up. The absent-minded Long Shou Jing subconsciously said, there are people who are hoarding and profiteering. We need to frighten them and gradually build a perfect market. Tang Tian's fleeing figure could clearly be seen at the entrance of the hall. It was not his first time coming to the Ursa Major Constellation Palace. The palace in front of him was much more dilapidated than the last time, but it did not have any signs of decadence. Liang Feng decided to travel with Long Shou Jing. Long Shou Jing's performance these few days also made him secretly nod in his heart. The illusion he had when he stepped into the palace was not an illusion. Ursa Major Palace. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his body shuddered. At this moment he suddenly heard Tang Tian's smiling voice. Master, a large number of unknown people have appeared around the Stargate. Desolate bare bone, what's the concentration of the star power? Long Shou Jing asked without turning his head. Ling Su, do you have any ideas? Tang Tian asked with anticipation. Draco Constellation Long Shou Jing greets your majesty. He was an indifferent person and did not like to fight for power, but towards his own talent, he was rather conceited. But when he saw the young Tang Tian in front of him, he could not help but become absent-minded. She said hatefully, Humph, your majesty and the rest are too useless to actually retreat at such a time. Luckily we have brother Shou Jing. The entire Ursa Major constellation's star power surged into Tang Tian's body, and then surged out from his body, dispersing into the heaven and earth. The star power in the air was lively and brimming with life. Because it was the imperial city, the concentration of star power was much higher than other places. Long Shou Jing shook his head, looking at the distant Ursa Major Palace, his expression faintly sad. No more. The vibrating mountain army is defeated, and we have lost our last chance. The concentration of star power in the palace had actually reached an astonishing 27%. He straightened his body, and took the lead to walk in front. Let's go. Let us go meet the legendary godlike young man. Ling Su turned his head, his face determined. It's very simple. Draco Constellation. What popped out in Tang Tian's mind was Bing's list. You can call me Tang Tian. Tang Tian did not like being addressed as Your Majesty, and sized Long Shou Jing up and down. No wonder it's called a handkerchief, it looks like it will fly away when the wind blows. This handkerchief's aura. It's similar to Little Crane. Oh, people who look like this seem to be more intelligent. Immortal Martial Envoy requests to pay a visit to Master. As expected, I am still smarter than Ling Su, Tang Tian silently cried in his heart. A young lady dressed in green beside him could not help but ask, Brother Shou Jing, do we really not have a chance? Long Shou Jing looked at the palace in the distance and stopped in his tracks. The guards by Long Shou Jing's side all revealed looks of indignation. Draco Constellation had met with an unprecedented danger, and everyone was helpless. Prince Shou Jing took the initiative to think of a solution, but no one expected that Draco King would push the boat with the current, and actually took the initiative to give up the throne. And the other three successors were even worse. One escaped in the middle of the night, and the other two pretended to be sick. Tang Tian was dumbstruck. This godlike young man would never do such things. Long Shou Jing sighed lightly, his face was pale white, his expression gloomy, his body somewhat frail, as though he would be blown away by the wind. Long Shou Jing was not the only one who was shocked. Liang Feng, who was traveling with him, looked at Tang Tian as though he was looking at a ghost. As a saint, Liang Feng's position in Draco Constellation was extremely high. Countless young geniuses would break their heads to enter his sword garden. He had seen countless geniuses, but none of them could be compared to the abnormal person in front of him. Long Shou Jing's first reaction was, so young. To be able to be called a young man, he was definitely not old, but personally seeing that Tang Tian was only 17 to 18, like an ordinary student, the shock in his heart could be imagined. Master, Draco Constellation's diplomatic group seeks an audience. Liang Feng looked at Long Shou Jing with interest. Initially he did not have anything to do, but the thoughts from that day lingered in his mind. The four constellations merging into one, Ursa Major Constellation had the qualifications to become a tyrant, and Liang Feng could not help but secretly think. After interacting with Bing, and observing the two armies from a close distance, his heart became even more certain. He thought that the huge numbers of mechanical armies under Bing's tutelage were continuously improving. Tang Tian was overjoyed. What do I do? What do I do? Tang Tian's smile blossomed like a flower and said, Hand towel, how about helping me with something? In times of danger, one could only see how a person was. There was nothing better than war to sharpen a martial artist, and nothing better than war to allow a martial artist to grow faster. War would allow martial artists to become stronger and stronger, and would also allow armies to become bigger and bigger. No matter how conceited he would definitely not be able to establish such a huge foundation at Tang Tian's age. Hearing the young lady's words, Long Shou-jing chuckled. He rubbed her head and said, "Xiao Juzi, don't be sad, we are actually not too bad now. Draco Constellation is not easy to be, but puppets are easy to be. Master, Ursa Major Constellation's food prices have skyrocketed, and many of the merchants have closed their shops." The eyes of the bodyguard beside him lit up with a misty light aura. A number lit up in his vision, and very quickly the light aura disappeared. He bowed and replied, "Your Highness, the star power concentration is 14%. This value had already reached the standard of the 10 equatorial palace halls. Han Tao, if the market price of food increases and many of the shops close, what do we do? Then we will lose even more, and it will be even more greedy." Long Shou-jing rubbed the young lady's head. He was a saint, his gaze was sharp and experienced, and in his eyes, it was a terrifying scene. On normal days, the first 3 successors were all outstanding and elegant and dazzling, but Prince Shou-jing did not have any sense of existence. If not for him taking the initiative to suggest joining Ursa Major Constellation, everyone would have forgotten that he was a successor. At that time, I was still in some corner of the academy. We have failed. Long Shou-jing looked at Xiao Juzi, his expression calm. There is always a price to pay for failure, and this price is already very light. After taking over the mess, Prince Shou-jing immediately calmed the hearts of the people and personally paid a visit to the commander of the enemy army, and then traveled day and night towards Ursa Major Palace. Long Shou-jing, who was at a loss, was surrounded by the tide of martial artists. As expected of smart Han Tao, Ling Su, who was by the side, was like a cat that had sensed danger. He suddenly opened his eyes wide and moved his but far to the side. Every time Crazy Tang used such a tone to speak, someone would be unlucky. Long Shou-jing respectfully bowed. Any saint, upon seeing such a scene, would feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. The flow of the star power was not fast, on the contrary, it was extremely slow, and ordinary martial artists would not be able to sense it. But their numbers were too astonishing. Even though it was slowly flowing, the scene was still astonishing. They had witnessed Prince Shou-jing's hard work and were secretly in awe. In the 5 polar domains, a place with a concentration of 27% of the star power had never been seen before, and Liang Feng could acutely sense that the concentration was still increasing. Ling Su raised the silver spear in his hand with a look of certainty. "I will stab them all to death." He squatted down, smiled, and patted Xiao Juzi's shoulder. "And it is just returning to my previous life. Being quiet and peaceful is good." With such a powerful military leader and 2 outstanding armies, Ursa Major Constellation's future was limitless. This judgment immediately made him take the initiative. Although he was a saint, but he knew his own limits. The war would definitely not end in a short period of time, and would only become more intense, and in the end, the entire Heaven's Road would be embroiled in it. Although he was a saint, in such a chaotic world, his life was like grass. Tang Tian was extremely anxious. But at that moment, the young lady seemed to have felt Long Shou-jing's sorrow. She pouted her lips, her face sad. Long Shou-jing woke up, a bad premonition rising in his heart, but he could only bite the bullet. "Your Majesty, please speak, I'm afraid." Shou-jing's ability. The young lady was only 13 to 14 years old, lively and cute. Her face was like a rosy apple. She liked to childishly shake her face, her apple face blossoming into a brilliant smile, her neat short hair fluttering in the air. Unless Ursa Major Constellation's destroyed inheritance was inside the desolate bare bone? After that, all sorts of matters, like 100 streams flowing back to the sea, came to Tang Tian. All of the bodyguards were the most elite martial artists of Draco Constellation, and Draco King and the other successors' unbearable performance made them feel humiliated. If not for the fact that they had long established their roots in Draco Constellation, if not for Prince Shou-jing's performance, which made them feel a sense of comfort, they would have long left Draco Constellation. Chapter 446. When the busy lupus martial artists saw Crane, they immediately stood up and bowed. Ling Su glanced at them and spat out 2 words, apple. Crane walked along the ruins of the palace and very quickly found Tang Tian's figure. Crane was curious but was not anxious. He understood Tang Tian well, although Crazy Tang was always crazy, but he was extremely stingy and would definitely not make life difficult for star coins. To be able to make such a decision with such a huge loss, there must be some other reason. Long Shoujing's face had a smile. Seems like these people are not hard to get along with. He turned his face and looked towards the direction of Orion constellation, his heart shouting silently. That's right, this godlike young lad has an earth-shattering plan. Tang Tian said happily. The progress of the bear egg plan had increased exponentially, because the training area was an egg shape, so Tang Tian decided to call it the bear egg. Was he not afraid that he would play some tricks? Good person. Tang Tian's face was filled with disdain. Crane's face revealed a smile. Greetings, Prince Shoujing. Greetings, Miss Juzi. You assholes. Crane's eyes lit up, an indescribable aura suddenly released, causing the surrounding martial artists to sense it, and could not help but shiver. Tang Tian's face became even more pleased. I want to build a very, very big egg, and erect a very sturdy pillar inside. It needs to be very tall. After that, it will be filled with sturdy ropes. Every layer will be filled from the pillar all the way outside. In the future, everyone can sit on the ropes and meditate and train. Oh, I am also preparing to dig underground and use ropes. Ropes are good, they do not take up much space. Everyone just squeeze together and make full use of it. Crane was dumbstruck hearing that in his mind, a gigantic pillar that pierced through the clouds appeared, with countless of densely packed thick ropes hanging down, like a spider web extending 14 li outwards. Every rope was like dried meat, hanging from it. Oh no, sitting on it were full of martial artists. What is Crazy Tang doing? Crane muttered in his mind. Ursa Major Palace was built using Yen Yong Lai's blood and sweat. It was grand and majestic and was a spectacular sight. The capital city had gone through many generations to reach its current scale. Tang Tian actually wanted to tear it down? Tang Tian turned around in surprise. Do you think it looks like an apple or an orange? That scene was too terrifying. Handkerchief. Crane's heart had a sense of empathy. As expected, honest people will always be bullied. Sure enough, Tang Tian gave a and a proud expression appeared on his face again. Hand towel, come and tell little Crane. Currently, the star power concentration in the center of the bear egg had already reached 31%. This terrifying value was already extremely close to the star power concentration of Sexton's constellation of the 10 equatorial palace halls. Sexton's constellation's foundation was its 33% star power concentration, and it was because of its high star power concentration that it became one of the most famous training constellations in Heaven's Road. On the day the bear egg was completed, everyone was still shocked by this building that they had built with their own hands. It was as if they were inside a huge egg, with a thick and solid bronze pillar standing in the middle of the egg. The densely packed ropes were like spiderwebs that spread out in all directions, entering the inner walls of the egg. Every rope had an entrance and exit, and martial artists only needed to step on the ropes and use light body techniques to move forward. Every rope had different lengths. The longest was 14 li, which was 7,000 meters. The shortest was 6 li, which was 3,000 meters. And on the ropes, every person had a space of 1.5 m. That also meant the longest rope could hold 4,000 martial artists. The shortest could also hold 1,500 martial artists. What are you guys doing? Crane's face was filled with surprise. Crane's footsteps stopped. He resisted the urge to stab Tang Tian with his sword. He pretended to be nonchalant and walked slowly. Such a big formation, what's the reason? Martial artists that were like locusts. And Adrian was about to become the dean of the Million Lupus martial artists. The dean of the Bear Egg Martial Courtyard. Furthermore, Tang Tian had not swallowed Draco Constellation yet. If he swallowed Draco Constellation's Saint Treasure, then Ursa Major Constellation's strength would soar once again. Everyone who heard the name, revealed an expression that could not bear to hear it. The lupus martial artists were cannon fodder, but 1,000,000 cannon fodder was enough to cause fear. The movement of 1,000,000 cannon fodder could not be hidden. From Lupus constellation to Ursa Major constellation, they had to pass through Andromeda constellation. When the 1,000,000 lupus martial artists formed a wolf tide and entered Andromeda constellation, it caused a huge commotion and panic. Crane was curious. How do you plan to use them? The veins on Xiao Juzi's forehead twitched. She endured it. Xiao Juzi had to be sensible and not cause trouble for big brother Shou Jing. Really? Xiao Juzi raised her head. Her face was filled with anticipation, but also a little embarrassed. The young lady Juzi by his side also followed and bowed. Big brother Prince Crane, I am Long Juzi. Crane listened quietly and did not interrupt. He could not understand Tang Tian's thoughts at all. Adrian had the name of a hunter. He had once personally brought an unknown academy to Orion Constellation's first academy and had the glorious history of it. But 1,000,000 students, the number of students he had in his entire teaching career, was not that many. Swoosh, everyone's gaze landed on Crane. Andromeda constellation that was beyond recognition had recovered to its original state in a night. Long Shou Jing could only open his mouth. This was Master Liang Feng's discovery. Master Liang Feng discovered the entire Ursa Major constellation's star power is circulating around His Majesty. Just that. You guys need to hold on a little longer. Seeing Crane, Tang Tian's eyes lit up. He jumped up and waved his hands. Little Crane. The martial artists around Long Shou Jing became serious. The black-robed young man was the rumored Prince Crane. The rumors outside said that Crane had the possibility of controlling Sagittarius constellation. The Empress had never denied this rumor, and more importantly, the Empress had never appointed a successor for Sagittarius constellation, so the credibility of this rumor rose. Prince Crane. I am Long Shou Jing. Long Shou Jing bowed. I greet Prince Crane. Hypocrite. Ling Su spat out 2 words. Crane did not care about him. His gaze landed on Long Shou Jing, who had a sickly pale face, and asked in surprise, This is? Tang Tian scoffed. Of course we have to demolish it. The concentration of star power, every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. We definitely cannot waste it. Those palaces are a hindrance. Furthermore, the assholes in the city went against me. They were playing tricks in the dark and were taken care of by hand towel. Such a good place. How can we let them have it so easily? I want them all to move out. How stupid was he to hand over 1,000,000 people to a captive? Crane brought 1,000,000 people, and in this 1,000,000 people, there were no old, young, or weak. They were all the most robust martial artists and youths of Lupus constellation. Crane nodded his head, but was puzzled. But there is no need to demolish the palace. Long Shou Jing continued. The high concentration of star power, to saints or half-step saints, does not have much meaning. Their true power is already close to the limit. But to middle and low-level martial artists, it can greatly shorten their training period. So His Majesty has decided to build a brand new training area here. Of course, Crane took out a small gift and consoled. This little Crane is for Miss Juzi. Only such a beautiful little sister like Miss Juzi is worthy of it. When Crane rushed to Ursa Major Palace covered in dust, he was surprised. All the constellations that bordered Andromeda constellation originally took the chance to occupy the star door, but upon seeing the terrifying wolf tide, all the constellations retracted all their forces in fear and completely retreated. Crane shuddered. Adrian's emotions were complicated. It was not because of the difficulty of the challenge, but because he was still a captive. Crane saw Xiao Juzi's mouth flattened, tears welling up in her eyes, and immediately said warmly, Xiao Juzi is truly beautiful. Ling Su looked at Tang Tian with disdain, childish. Adrian was shocked for a long time. The structure in front of him was a miracle. Bears do not lay eggs. He shook his head, throwing away the doubts in his mind. Regardless of what Tang Tian was thinking, he would not give up on his own ideas. Maybe he could think of some place that could help Orion constellation. If he were to kill his way back alone, it would not help the situation at all. Here, maybe he could think of a way to affect Tang Tian and affect Ursa Major constellation. That would be of even greater help to Orion constellation. Xiao Juzi, you obviously look like an apple. Why are you called Xiao Juzi? Tang Tian had a weird look on his face. It was definitely the biggest training ground in history. Crane dared to confirm, if any of the scouts from any constellation saw such a shocking scene, they would definitely not have the courage to attack Ursa Major constellation. The majestic palaces had disappeared, and there were martial artists everywhere, continuously flattening the big and small palaces. Flattening the palaces, His Majesty requested for all the palaces to be flattened, the entire capital must be flattened, and all the citizens in the capital have moved out. It's great that Your Highness Crane is here, we do not have enough manpower. The martial artist's face was filled with joy. Adrian did not know why Tang Tian did not swallow up Draco constellation, but the scene in front of him had already caused him to be deeply shaken. Xiao Juzi received it happily. Thank you, big brother, Your Highness Crane. Although Long Shou Jing was surprised, but he was not affected too much, he continued. After our research, we found out, the closer to Master, the denser the star power. With Master as the center, the density of the star power in a radius of 1 kilometer is the highest. Currently it has already reached 29%, and for every 1 kilometer, the density will decrease by 1%. Currently, Ursa Major constellation's average star power density has risen to 15%. That also means, with Master as the center, there is a high-density star power region of 14 kilometers. Crane's face was filled with helplessness, but he knew how to deal with Tang Tian and coughed lightly. Where's your earth-shattering big plan? The ordinary places of Ursa Major constellation had a density of 17%, which had already surpassed Yen Yong Lai's era, and the value was still rising. Such a scene caused Angelina's emotions to become extremely complicated. She immediately took action to select immortal female martial artists with potential and sent them to Ursa Major constellation. Every distance apart, there would be eye-catching signs, reminding the martial artists of the star power density. And every rope had a number, so that the martial artists could easily find them. The maximum number of martial artists that Bear Egg could hold was 520,000 people. Even with Liang Feng's saint-level temperament, he could not help but have the urge to roll his eyes. Recently he had seen so many perverse people. To him, it was a form of ridicule. Chapter 447. Swordray. Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering Technique. This Tang Tian truly does not want to live anymore. The man who spoke had thick eyebrows and a bald head. He looked simple and honest. Could it be that he knew we were going to make a move? Using this method to protect themselves? Normally, Adrian would have despised these students for being too dull, but faced with such a large number of students in such a short time, he was filled with joy. Hiss hiss hiss. Idiot! It was publicly acknowledged as the cruelest soul tempering technique. This was very convenient. He only needed to choose those elders with prestige. It was as if Lu Zhongguang had transformed into a werewolf, stepping on ropes and inspecting along the way, his mouth constantly roaring. Long Shou Jing was in charge of all the work in Bear Head City. Following the Fairy Commerce Union's injection of energy into the market, the new Bear Head City had already started to glow with life, and the market had become much more prosperous. A pained expression appeared on Tang Tian's face. Of course, the majority of the Ursa Major constellation martial artists were not willing to call him that, but following the countless of stupid things that Tang Tian had done, they all liked to call Tang Tian as Ursa Major's stupid master. Out of these lupus warriors, he had no idea how many experts and saints there would be. Your Majesty's true power is full. His next cultivation would focus on his martial soul. If your Majesty wants to maintain the bear egg for a long time, Dums, you should feel ashamed. Even a bone was so sneaky. Impulsiveness is the devil. In the depths of his mind, a flustered and exasperated voice let loose a torrent of curses. Tang Tian's pupils, which had lost focus, instantly contracted to the size of needles. Liang Feng was suddenly filled with confidence for the future. Sword Torix. He read through the Ursa Major star's umbrella. as technique at a glance, and after a while, he had some comprehension. You with the surname He, don't use words to pressure me. Who is the Bear King? To this old man, it doesn't matter. This old man doesn't have much ability, so I'm convinced by real men. The fool would have nothing to say even if King Yonglai lost to him after this round. Losing isn't a big deal. Losing to a true hero is more convincing. If he were to increase his overall strength by 2 ranks, the 3 of them fell silent. None of them knew what to say. All right, I don't really have a choice. Sleeping is better than dying. Although he was a little dumb, his courage was unparalleled. I really don't know what to do. Sharing a body with this idiot is really too dangerous. No one knew who created the Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering technique. It had always been passed down among sword martial artists, but very few dared to try it. There were all sorts of spirit tempering methods, but the principle was the same, which was to use true power to temper the martial spirit. Liang Feng looked at Tang Tian as if he had seen a ghost. The so-called true power is the energy that we can use after we absorb and transform it. What is star power then? It was produced by the constellation and had a unique attribute of energy. So why was there a difference between constellation martial artists? Some people said that it was the constellation inheritance, but in fact, the source was star power. Every constellation operated in a different way, and the star power they produced were all different. How could he unleash the power of these completely different star forces? That would form the unique inherited martial techniques of each constellation. Why was it that when martial artists from other constellations learned these inherited martial techniques, their power would be greatly reduced? It was because the true power in their bodies was not compatible with their martial techniques. Some people said, I trained in the corresponding mental cultivation technique, but the star power that you absorb in your body has its own inherent nature. If you want to change it, you will need to spend more time, so the efficiency is lower. Once the spirit flame was extinguished, the damage to the martial artist was huge, and it meant that the martial artist was completely crippled. If the spirit flame was not extinguished, the injury could be recovered, but once the spirit flame was extinguished, it was impossible to recover. Everyone's expression froze. Adrian stood at the entrance, looking at the densely packed lupus martial artists on the ropes. He asked without turning his head, "What's the concentration of the star power? How do we remove it?" The bald man snorted. The entire Ursa Major constellation's star power is gathering and circulating in his body. How thick are the sword auras around him? You are a sword user, speak. Everyone's attention was roused. They all pricked up their ears, afraid to miss out on a single word. Spirit domain had always been mysterious and unfathomable to martial artists. Gaining enlightenment on spirit domain was the symbol of being bestowed as a saint, and spirit domain was the main method of attack after the saint rank. Teacher, how long does the Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering technique last? Xiao could not help but ask. Liang Feng had never seen the real Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering technique before, but he was 100% sure that what Tang Tian was doing was the legendary Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering technique. There was no need to worry about them not listening to orders. The obedience of the lupus martial artists was so good that Adrian felt that it was inconceivable. Whatever you asked them to do, they would do it without hesitation and never asked why. Pai Pa's words immediately made Tang Tian sit up straight, his expression becoming solemn. Everyone's eyes turned green. The rumor was not just a rumor. Old Man Fei knew that even the previously silent Fornax constellation strategy was slowly being pushed forward. In truth, all of the martial techniques that we are using now have the ultimate goal of the spirit domain. Liang Feng's words were shocking, and his face couldn't help but flush slightly. These were all the insights he'd gained from his many years of research, and he usually kept it a secret. Now that he'd explained it to so many people, it actually made him feel like he was preaching the Tao. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. Tang Tian completely did not expect such a reaction. The process of tempering the spirit flame was extremely painful. Every time he tempered the martial spirit in the past, the pain of the blade cutting into his bones left a deep impression on Tang Tian. Adrian was very experienced. When he knew that he wanted to groom 1,000,000 people, the first thing he did was to choose a teacher from the lupus martial artists. As expected of the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique. Everyone treasured it. Liang Feng only felt a mouthful of blood rushing to his throat. He had spent so much effort, flipped through all the records, and prepared a killing technique, but it actually failed. 3 Spirit City. But when 1,000,000 people were like that scene, the impact it brought, was incomparable. Tang Tian did not alarm too many people. He came to Sai Lei's laboratory. Sai Lei noticed Tang Tian's arrival, glanced at him, and said impatiently, "Don't come over and cause trouble, I'm busy." Tang Tian's face suddenly revealed a cold smile. The atmosphere in the base was jubilant. Tang Tian had defeated Ursa Major Constellation, causing everyone's confidence to soar. In the past, although the base's treatment was good, but no one knew what would happen in the future. But with Ursa Major Constellation, without question, in the upcoming chaotic world, everyone would have a place to settle down. Assassination. Pai Pa's face was filled with worry. Xiao's gaze turned towards the center, at the figure enveloped in layers of sword light. It's been so many years, but we still have to wait and see if we can endure it, then we are real men. Ah. Fool, enjoy it well? He was an intelligent man, he was good at judging the situation, and knew his own limits. Although he was a saint, but in truth he still felt a little guilty teaching Tang Tian and the rest. To him, under normal circumstances, he might not have the qualifications to teach them. They were quiet, other than quietly training, they rarely spoke. But every time they opened their eyes, they would reveal a hint of fanaticism, causing Xiao to feel a formless pressure. Not good. The whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique was not a secret. Many sword martial artists knew of it, but very few dared to try it. Other than courage, in history, there were many who were unable to endure the pain of the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique, and died. Tang Tian's spirit flame was like a candle. Upon being struck by the intense star power, it could be extinguished at any time. The one who is most likely to make a move on us is Cetus constellation. And between us and Cetus constellation, there is a star door. Of course, other constellations can also take advantage of it. I'm done. Then what is a martial spirit? Does everyone still remember how a martial spirit comes about? A martial spirit is produced when your true power reaches a certain level. In the beginning, the martial spirit is very faint, like a mist, but as it continues to congeal, it will form into different forms. Then what exactly is a martial spirit? A martial spirit is your spirit that has been transformed by energy. If you all have mental cultivation techniques for martial spirits, you will realize the essence of these mental cultivation techniques is to use true power to temper your spirit. The more thorough the transformation, the higher the grade of the martial spirit. Furthermore, they still had an even more terrifying leader. CSISI, a hissing sound that caused people's hearts to palpitate, came out from Tang Tian's body. The star power whirlpool suddenly transformed into countless of minute fragmented flows. Every flow was as sharp as a sword. Xiao's eyes widened. Such a torture, to actually last for a month. Can this brat even endure it? This brat obviously did not train in sword techniques. Xiao looked at the data and said calmly, "It's already close to 40%. The increase in the past few days is very large. The whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique seems to have increased the concentration of star power. This time, I do not know how long I will have to sleep again." As expected, I did not fight with the fool for the leading position. Did I already set the tone for failure? But the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique was different. It used sword auras to temper the martial spirit, and that was the reason why it was publicly acknowledged as the most cruel tempering technique. We are discussing our next plan. Xiao's face revealed a look of approval. These lupus martial artists were truly hardworking. The bones in Tang Tian's body seemed to be enduring the immense pressure, releasing a sound that made people's teeth ache. For example, the lady from Sagittarius constellation would definitely snort at him. The eccentric and unpredictable crazy lady would find someone to get rid of him. He was slightly worried. Liang Feng's expression froze. He stammered, "Did I tell you about the desolate bare bone? 100 billion. the bright sword aura, was like a high-speed grinding wheel, frantically grinding against the spirit flame. He had prepared a few simple tests, and then split the lupus martial artists into a few types, and then formulated different training plans for them. After returning from Three Spirit City, Tang Tian did not think too much about it, and only told Liang Feng about it, and immersed himself in training as usual. Tang Tian's heavy hands slowly formed a strange sword art. Under his continuous hard work, the star power in his body gradually formed a whirlpool. As time passed, the whirlpool continued to grow stronger, the speed of its rotation increased, becoming more and more turbulent. Saying that, Liang Feng's mouth twitched, he resisted the urge to suggest His Majesty to change the name Bear Egg. His hands seemed to be extremely heavy. In just a few centimeters, his entire body was drenched in perspiration. Liang Feng was stunned. Subconsciously, he formed a seal with both hands, a yellow light aura blossomed from his body, and a human tall mountain peak appeared in front of him. So when Liang Feng saw the sword aura whirlpool revolving crazily around Tang Tian, he was dumbstruck. But this fool's luck seems to be pretty good. Let me first talk about the latest news. Bell said, let me first talk about the situation in Heaven's Road, the battle between Leo Constellation and the Honorable Martial Alliance. Other than Orion Constellation, just 2 days ago, Cetus Constellation, Aquila Constellation and Canis Minor Constellation of the 10 Equatorial Palace Halls announced that they had joined the Honorable Martial Alliance camp. The diplomatic methods of the Honorable Martial Alliance are outstanding, and as for Orion Constellation, it has now become a gigantic meat grinder. Both sides are continuously sending in high-level martial artists, and it is said that the battle inside is extremely intense. Overall, Leo Constellation is starting to be at a disadvantage. Of course, the battle has not reached its climax, and the future situation is not clear. Some people will definitely want to ask, what is the essence of spirit? Here, I am sorry to tell everyone, until now, no Grandmaster has been able to answer this question. So, towards this power, the ancient sages used the word spirit to define it. The ancient sages quickly realized, when the martial spirit is strong to a certain degree, it is even stronger than true power. Because it can imitate all kinds of objects, and that is what we call the spirit domain. Not sleeping or resting, this kind of crazy training, was something Ashio had seen before. In every academy, there would always be a few such training maniacs, and it was not surprising. Big Dipper? Tang Tian was surprised and said proudly, it is obviously the Ursa Major Star's umbrella. Little Bones already told me. But recently, everyone was discussing about His Majesty Bear King. Liang Feng muttered to himself. Even if it was against a saint, it would not be easily destroyed. Liang Feng's martial techniques were heavy on offense and light on defense, but after reaching the saint level, he still managed to come up with a few specialized defensive techniques, and this unmoving peak was one of them. Using the spirit domain to imitate the mountain peak structure, he had referenced the structure of many shield auras. Inside the small unmoving peak, there were 9 layers of defense, and this was his masterpiece. After a while, the middle-aged scholar laughed bitterly. I hope he is smashed to pieces. Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering Technique. Ursa Major Star's Umbrella. When everyone had dispersed, and only Tang Tian and a few others were left, Liang Feng then opened his mouth. Teaching students was definitely not an easy task. Different students had different specialties, and a good teacher would teach according to their aptitude. In the private room upstairs, sat 3 ordinary dressed martial artists. The discussion downstairs could be clearly heard by the 3 of them through the roof. Liang Feng never thought that Tang Tian would be so rash. Damn it. Although the surrounding star power flow was very slow, but the quantity was too astonishing, converging in Tang Tian's body, it was extremely terrifying. Tang Tian's tyrannical body could withstand it, but it did not mean that his spirit flame could. You only need to place the desolate bear bone in the center of the bear egg. But, inside the desolate bear bone, there is a high possibility that the Ursa Major Constellation's secret technique, Big Dipper? No. The middle-aged scholar shook his head. It's 7 m thick, from the mad sword Saint Lin Xiaoguang 700 years ago. For a cunning person like me, every time I am forced by this fool to be the good guy for free, this world really makes people feel helpless. Tang Tian's sudden appearance of sword techniques made him suspicious, but that was Tang Tian's secret, and he did not have the intention to probe. And Tang Tian daring to use the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique made him deeply shocked. The bald man waved his hand. A 60 m whirlpool sword, everyone save it, anyway my spirit domain will definitely not be able to block it. Tang Tian opened his palm. But to raise the standard of the lupus martial artists by 2 levels, he had absolute confidence. He was not arrogant at all, anyone with a bit of teaching experience would be able to do it. The lupus people were too persevering and hardworking. What he could do was to shorten the time needed. In the process of governing, Long Shou-jing brought a few gold-ranked martial artists and barged into a few dishonest families, and directly brought their patriarchs back, causing the other families to keep quiet out of fear. Tang Tian then understood. Liang Feng could not believe his own eyes, his immovable peak was actually broken so easily. Tang Tian's hands trembled and slowly rose up. Xiao was enlightened. That means to say this rise is temporary? Even Yen Yonglai, who was famed for his bravery in the past, did not dare to use the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique. Listen, listen, what a brave wail. All of you, raise your spirits, your Majesty Lupus King is so brave, he is so angry, what reason do you all have to be lazy? Liang Feng stared blankly at Tang Tian, who was surrounded by countless of sword auras. Every ray of sword aura was dazzling, surrounding Tang Tian's body, revolving quickly. But when Tang Tian saw Uncle Bing in the hall, he jumped in fright. Hey, Uncle, why are you here? But the pain this time was 100 times more intense than any other time. Adrian himself felt suffocated. It was as if he could see a wave of wolves engulfing Heaven's Road. Yes, so tell Zhongguang to hurry up. If you miss this time, it will be hard to meet again. Adrian instructed. A few old fellows secretly heard that the boss had earned a huge sum of money. No one knew how much it was, but it was rumored to be at least 100 billion. Liang Feng's senses were extremely sharp. He could feel, every time Tang Tian's hands rose an inch, the surrounding star power would have an obvious change. Impossible! The lady was dressed in white, her appearance was beautiful, but her expression was cold. No matter how much we look down on him, he is still the new Bear King. If he had received the news, how could he not do anything? Furthermore, he has a martial artist like Liang Feng by his side. Ruthless enough. Bell sat down very straightforwardly. Liang Feng was giving a lecture. The seats in front of him were filled with people, with Tang Tian and the rest sitting at the front. Everyone's expressions were focused. Liang Feng was a true saint, and it was hard for them to even meet him on normal days. If not for Her Majesty wanting to listen to the lecture, if not for Her Majesty's generosity, how would they have the chance to listen to a saint's lecture? The martial artists that remained were mostly lifestyle martial artists, and on how to make use of them, the Fairy Commerce Alliance had rich experience. In the tea house, a few idlers drank tea and discussed. Just based on his courage and determination, his future was limitless. Ursa Major Constellation's future was definitely bright. Everyone became even more engrossed. They had some understanding of such things, but no one had ever been able to explain it in simple terms like Liang Feng. Feeling the killing intent behind him, Tang Tian laughed and turned, and sat down again. Everyone speak, I'll listen. But in front of the sword auras, it was like paper. Bare egg. Tang Tian's attention landed on the desolate bare bone in his body. The desolate bare bone seemed to have sensed danger, and with a swoosh, it flew out from Tang Tian's body and floated above Tang Tian's head. That's right. Tang Tian nodded his head. I have already started training. That's right. The middle-aged scholar sitting opposite the lady spoke. Then it can only be used by him. How many years has it been since anyone used the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique? This person is ruthless. If we do not get rid of him this time, he will definitely become our enemy in the future. TSK, how many days has it been? An old man sipped his tea and asked without raising his head. Bear eggs wails could be heard from far away. The matter of stupid master using the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique had spread like wildfire in Bear Head City and became everyone's favorite topic of discussion. The wails could be heard, but Ashio's face did not have a trace of ridicule, but rather admiration. At that moment he was truly convinced to lose to such a person was not shameful at all. Bang. It was like, "Hey, can you handle it? How do we gain enlightenment on these laws, martial techniques?" That is also why I said that the martial techniques that everyone trains in have the ultimate goal of the spirit domain. The martial techniques that we train in, other than fighting, the most important thing is to help everyone gain enlightenment on the corresponding laws. The higher the grade of inheritance, the more traces of laws it will contain, its might will naturally be stronger, and will also be more beneficial for you to gain enlightenment on the laws itself. Tang Tian seemed to have changed into a different person. It was obviously the same face, but Liang Feng felt that it was a different person. Tang Tian pursed his lips tightly. Even though he was using all the strength in his body, Tang Tian's face was not sinister at all, but instead revealed an indescribable cold indifference. Liang Feng's face changed. Not good, it's a sword aura. Everyone around nodded their heads. Yes, yes. If anything happened to Tang Tian, then Tang Tian's spirit flame was coincidentally in the center of the whirlpool. Following the increasing speed of the whirlpool became bigger and bigger. The star power around the spirit flame was being pushed outwards, as though it was in the eye of a storm. The bald man sneered, "Stop dreaming, this fellow's wails are so loud that I can hear them from 20 li away." All of the lupus martial artists sat on the ropes and trained with all their might. Lu Zhongguang's roars could be heard from time to time. In that moment, Tang Tian's mind went blank. Thinking about it, it was right. As long as Uncle Bing entered the spirit region, he could easily return to Three Spirits City from anywhere. Liang Feng heard Tang Tian say that Cetus constellation might make a move, so he did not dare to be careless, and simply stood guard by Tang Tian's side. At that moment he felt something strange, and suddenly opened his eyes, his gaze landing on Tang Tian's body, and his face changed. Of course, the most crucial thing was that the tight budget had suddenly loosened a lot. The violent spear maniac, the inheritance in his hands also had a huge background, the inheritance of the silver frost mount. Thinking about it made Liang Feng feel a pain in the ass. Such a top-grade inheritance, I do not even have it. Tang Tian laughed. Don't worry, recently my strength has improved a lot. Heh, let them witness the power of this godlike young lad. Heart-wrenching wails immediately resonated throughout the entire bear egg. To train so crazily, even the most ordinary of talents would be able to possess extraordinary strength. And when this 1 million matures, how terrifying would that be? The lady in white revealed a look of shock. 60 m thick, how can the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique be so thick? If I remember correctly, the thickest whirlpool sword spirit that has ever appeared was only 15 m thick. Liang Feng's words flowed like a river after speaking for 2 hours. Only then did everyone disperse reluctantly. For the first time, Liang Feng's heart was filled with admiration. Previously, when he relied on Tang Tian, it was more out of consideration for the situation, but at that moment, the admiration he had for Tang Tian was the most instinctive admiration of a martial artist. Ashio was startled, but nodded his head. Teacher is right. Look, if he can really endure it, then the position of Bear King, it is not impossible for him to take it. Countless sharp energy forces shot out in all directions with a loud rumble. Tangdan was in so much pain that his face twitched. He could feel his consciousness quickly blurring. He knew he was about to fall into a deep slumber. You woke me up, and now you want me to fall into a deep slumber? Fool, you think I will let you off so easily? Belle fiercely swallowed a mouthful of water, wiped her mouth, and said, You don't have to remind them. Adrian glanced at the densely packed lupus martial artists and said, They are already giving it their all. In truth, although these lupus martial artists' talent is average, but they are hard-working, I have never seen them in so many constellations. But Liang Feng's attention was quickly attracted by Tang Tian's raised hands. The middle-aged scholar's face was filled with helplessness. The sword auras around him now are at least 60 m thick. The small mountain peak just now suddenly crumbled. In her eyes, he was just a small character. Truly a group of terrifying fellows. Tang Tian's screams resonated throughout the entire bear egg. For this point, we have to talk about the spirit domain. The essence of the spirit domain is the mimicry of the martial spirit. How is it possible to gain enlightenment on the spirit domain? Very simple. When you have an extremely deep understanding of a certain law, and your martial spirit is strong and pure enough, you can form a spirit domain that belongs to you. Some people use the sword to enter the Tao, some people observe the heavens to enter the Tao, some people use chess to enter the Tao. They are all different, but there is one thing that is necessary, and that is to have a deep understanding of a certain law. Just like how there are no two identical leaves in the world, there are no identical spirit domains in the world. There are trillions of laws in the world, and the same law, different people have different understandings of it. Tang Tian's consciousness slowly recovered, the unparalleled pain, from the deepest part of his spirit flame to every corner of his body. Tang Tian sat in the center of the bear egg, his eyes closed, his consciousness completely immersed in the star power in his body. In his inner vision, the Ursa Major constellation's star power was clearly displayed in front of him. The surging star power converged from all directions towards Tang Tian, flushing his spirit flame. Countless dazzling light auras converged from all directions, like dazzling stars. Everyone only had a rope that was half a meter long to stand on. With such a harsh and extreme training environment, if it was any other place, the students would have long since complained. They would request for a soundproof quiet room or a private room that they could pay for but had better conditions. But all the lupus martial artists did not complain. Every single one of them sat on the rope for an entire day. When they were hungry, they would gnaw on their rations. When they were thirsty, they would bring along a water bottle. Tens of thousands of sword lights revolved around. You don't say, although the stupid master is stupid, but his ruthlessness is still strong. The whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique, how many years has it not produced such a ruthless person? Hey, as the leader, this is too irresponsible. Bing's face was gloomy, his killing intent soaring as he squeezed out a sentence. But it is very far. Bing's next sentence destroyed Tang Tian's thoughts. He calmed himself down and continued to explain. Meetings and whatnot are the most frustrating. Tang Tian's spirit flame lit up with dazzling sparks. Ah! The 6th day. Another old man gestured. A hole suddenly appeared on Tang Tian's clothes, as though it was cut by a sharp chi. Liang Feng did not dare to imagine, and only felt his hands and feet turning cold. Both of Tang Tian's hands were finally raised to his chest, that indifferent face finally had a slight change in expression. According to what Liang Feng said in the morning, what he needed to do now was to temper his martial spirit. This was the big killing technique that Liang Feng had prepared for a long time. As a newcomer, to leave a deep impression in the boss' heart, he needed a big killing technique. Old Miao, what do you mean by that? Unless, King Yong Lai, you have forgotten about it so quickly? Seeing that, Tang Tian tactfully left. Liang Feng then saw an extremely strange scene. The estimated budget to attack Fornax constellation was in the hundreds of billions. Bel Pai Pa and Tang Chou are all here. Tang Tian then noticed and stood up to escape. You guys are having a meeting? Aha, then I shall not disturb you guys. Adrian glanced at him, then retracted his gaze. Let's mind our own business. 40% star power concentration, this is already the standard of an ecliptic palace constellation. In a month's time, if we do not have any results, then it will be embarrassing. Chi. This formless pressure caused his heart to tremble uncontrollably. 3 martial artists, 2 males and 1 female, each occupied a corner. Normal. Adrian nodded his head. He was experienced and could see the crux of the matter. Previously, when the star power was gathered, it was the effect of the desolate bare bone, but the suction force was not strong. The whirlpool produced by the whirlpool sword has a more obvious effect on the star power gathering. The entire Ursa Major constellation's star power is gathering here, and the star power concentration outside will decrease by a certain degree. 1 month. Liang Feng regretted the theory that he said today. The whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique is publicly recognized as the cruelest tempering technique. Compared to the pain your Majesty Wolf King had to endure, the pain you guys are enduring now is just an itch. It can't even compare to an itch. Feel ashamed, your blood is boiling. Train, only train, train with all your might, crazily train, disregard everything to train, only then can you be worthy of your Wolf King. Liang Feng almost thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. That crazy guy, how could he have such a high-class smile on his face? That guy has always been smiling foolishly. Using true power to temper the martial spirit, the process was extremely painful. But after the true power had been refined through the meridians, it was much gentler, and the damage was much smaller. But the sword auras were extremely extreme, brimming with destructive energy. Using it to temper the martial spirit, the pain could be said to be torture. And the whirlpool sword spirit tempering law went one step further, using countless of sword auras to form a whirlpool, like a grinding wheel, to quickly temper the martial spirit. Such pain was something that very few people could endure. Next, let's talk about us. Ursa Major constellation situation is not good. Previously, there were many constellations that were restless against us. But with the migration of the Lupus race, many powerhouses retreated. But there are still a few constellations that are more hostile towards us. The most worrisome one is Cetus constellation. With the enmity between us and the Honorable Martial Alliance, if Cetus constellation were to swallow us, the Honorable Martial Alliance would be happy to see it happen. If Cetus constellation can swallow us, then their support to Orion constellation will be greatly strengthened. And Cetus constellation itself is coveting Ursa Major constellation. The awakening of Big Dipper and the legendary ancient inheritance of Ursa Major constellation are all things that they desire to obtain. Hard to say. Adrian's gaze also landed on Tang Tian, but at the very least, it will take at least a month. The sword auras shot into the mountain peak like raindrops. Liang Feng, who had just recovered from the shock, suddenly had a change of expression. He suddenly retreated, his figure flashed, and he retreated 60 m away. The three of them became quiet again, no one knew what to say. Liang Feng spoke very seriously. To explain to Tang Tian and the rest, he had to be 120% focused. In the future, he wanted to earn a living under Tang Tian. It was such a good opportunity. If he did not grab it, he would be too stupid. Every broken flow lit up with a faint light aura, like countless of thin swords, converging into a whirlpool. When your true power continues to accumulate, the higher it goes, the harder it gets. That is because there is a limit to how much star power a human body can hold. If we say we set the maximum amount of true power a human can hold at 100, then you will realize, when your true power reaches 80, it will be extremely difficult to increase it further. The ancient sages had discovered this problem a long time ago. When the true power reaches 80, to increase it further, the efficiency is extremely low, and the increase in strength is also relatively limited. At this time, the ancient sages placed their attention on the martial spirit. Psi. Draco constellation has a star door, which leads to the spirit region. Bing raised his eyebrows. Liang Feng's face was pale white. He was experienced and knowledgeable. The strange scene in front of him made him think of an extremely extreme training method that he had seen in the ancient records. Tang Tian's spirit flame was in the midst of the surging star power, flickering, in a precarious situation. After a moment, the light aura dissipated, and a pocket-sized transparent umbrella floated in Tang Tian's palm. The outline of the umbrella was not clear, and was rather blurry, as though it would be blown away by the wind if it was slightly stronger. The umbrella's surface would occasionally have light spots become brighter, like the stars in the night sky. Tang Cho said solemnly, "If Cetus constellation plans to take action against us, then their actions will be very fast. Now is our weakest time. Ursa Major constellation has just changed masters, and we have not stabilized ourselves. And Master's army is far away in Draco constellation. At this time, it is the best time to take action." The new Bear Head city was flourishing day by day. Its position was only about 50 li away from Bear Egg. The majority of the people living here were the original residents of Bear Head City, and the security here was very good. Small bones. Chapter 448. Lu Zhongguang's voice made Tang Tian want to kick him in the face. Listen to my asshole, brave my asshole, I don't want to, you should be brave. Ah. Tang Tian screamed, truly brimming with the beauty of art. Dong 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 dong. Ling Su righteously said, brother will not snatch what he likes. He will definitely feel great. Ling Su said with certainty and seriousness, his words filled with envy. The rhythm of both parties was in sync. Uncle Bing had a cigarette in his mouth, standing not far from Tang Tian's whirlpool swords. He puffed out a smoke ring and said, truly a heavenly sound. Seeing the worried expressions on their faces. As expected, happiness comes from comparison. If it was said that previously, everyone still had other thoughts, but now, everyone was convinced. The two of them turned, only to see Crane quietly using his sword, writing a praise on the floor. This was the cruelest part of the whirlpool sword's spirit tempering technique. Not only would it not cause the martial artist to faint, but instead, following the sword aura's continuous tempering of the martial spirit, the martial artist's sixth senses would become even more sensitive, and the pain that originated from the soul would be extremely profound. But he was not randomly giving out ideas. The reason why Draco Constellation was able to maintain its prestige for the past few years was because of their outstanding internal affairs. Unlike Andromeda Constellation's business, Ursa Major Constellation's battle prowess, Draco Constellation actually did not have many resources. To be able to have their current position was because they had a group of core internal affairs talents and a perfect grooming system. What a pity! Uncle Bing stood up and flicked the cigarette holder in his hand. If we can sell tickets, we can earn a huge sum. Uncle Bing squatted down, took out the cigarette holder from his mouth and wrote on the floor, you are full of twists and turns, you are loud and clear, you are endless, you are full of emotions, who are you? You are electricity, you are light. You are the only crazy person. Long Shou quietly listened to the sounds coming from the Bear Egg, and could not help but sigh. It had been a long time since he had heard such a pure and explosive drumming performance. Although there were still flaws in his technique, it was as wild as a wild beast, as smooth as a storm, and as incisive as a heart-wrenching scream. It could be said to be perfect. Not necessarily no chance. How many chances? Although Long Shou Jing's tone was calm, it could not help but reveal a wave of power. The few of them saw the fatigue on Long Shou Jing's face and hurriedly retreated. Crane's figure was natural and unrestrained, elegant and out of this world. A sky dragon martial artist said in a deep voice, through the sensing distance, we can roughly determine their strength. They should be sages. Although they had disguised their appearances, their attires still left some clues. After some investigation, we roughly found the target. The three of them are saints of Cetus Constellation. The bald man is Fist Saint Do Yong, the middle-aged scholar is Sword Saint He Yuming, and the lady in white is Zither Saint by CC. Following such a boss, the future was bright. A complete set of drums. I understand what you're thinking. But why hadn't they made a move after so many days? It is very simple, the whirlpool swords are too thick, they could not find a chance to attack. Long Shou Jing said gently, this is Ursa Major Constellation, they have the home advantage and wield the Saint Treasure. Once His Majesty completes his tempering, how can they have a chance? And the worst thing was, even the sounds around him could pass through the thick whirlpool swords and bore into his ears. There was completely no way out. The Sky Dragon martial artists beside him all nodded their heads. Prince Shou Jing's artistic cultivation was extremely profound. To be able to receive such an evaluation, it meant that the other party's attainments were extremely profound. All of them anxiously wanted to gain merits and take the chance to solidify Draco Constellation's position. Long Shou Jing could understand their sense of danger. Dong dong dong. Dong dong dong. Yaya with his short legs and short hands jumped up, waving the wooden club in his hands. Yaya came out from nowhere, sneakily running to a place not far from Tang Tian. Hearing Tang Tian's miserable howls, he immediately became excited, his small hands pounding his chest like raindrops, raising his head and shouting, "Ah ah." His Majesty Bear King's side was truly filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. To actually have a music expert, most probably this expert wanted to use this method to alleviate His Majesty's pain. After the few of them left, the room regained its peace. Long Shou-Jing's face revealed a bitter smile. To be an idle person, he never thought that it would be so difficult. This world truly made people feel despair. But his voice was completely drowned out by Tang Tian's miserable screams, and could not be heard at all. No. The Sky Dragon martial artist hesitated for a moment. If Saint Liang Feng can make a move, we might have a chance. Listen, listen. What a brave cry. Yaya immediately became high, entering an unprecedented state of excitement. It was like an extremely nimble little flea, jumping around the drumsticks. The drumsticks were like rain. The frequency was extremely fast. Every drumstick used all of its strength, and puffed up its cheeks. Ling Su scratched his head. Everyone was writing except for him. It seemed to be of a lower class. He awkwardly raised his silver spear and scribbled, "A true brave warrior dares to face the miserable cries of life." The few of them were overjoyed, as expected of His Majesty. His eyes were sharp. Long Shou-Jing sighed. He was naturally indifferent, and did not like to fight for power. If not for him not wanting to see Sky Dragon die, why would he take on such matters? He had originally planned to enter Ursa Major Constellation, and be a good puppet, since puppets were no different to him. Lu Zhongguang was stunned, Ashio was stunned, Adrian was stunned. All of the lupus martial artists were stunned by the scene in front of them. Who knew? Tang Tian did not give him the chance to retreat, and directly threw him a bunch of things. Currently, all of Draco Constellation's eyes were on him. He had become the representative of Draco Constellation, and his position was directly related to Draco Constellation's position in the system. And in the core region of the Bear Egg, there was enough space for Draco Constellation. To the various families of Draco Constellation, it was an irresistible temptation. Yaya stopped, and then disappeared again. After a while, it brought the bronze sheep, tortoise and squirrel over sneakily. The bronze sheep had 4 different size drums on its body, the tortoise had a treading hoe on its back, and the adorable little squirrel had 2 hands, one holding a hoe. What made them even happier was that upon seeing His Majesty, Prince Shou-Jing was placed in an important position. To the martial artists of Draco Constellation, this made their suspicions disappear. 40% star power concentration. As expected of a son of an aristocratic family. Uncle Bing exclaimed in admiration, "For such a memorable occasion, we truly have to leave something behind." The various families had already sent their most talented and outstanding young men to Ursa Major Constellation, and amongst them were their sons and nephews. The entire Draco Constellation had already started to accept the result of being merged into Ursa Major Constellation. For Prince Shou-Jing to be able to enter Tang Tian's inner circle of authority was extremely important to them. It was because of this stimulation that they worked extremely hard. Towards Tang Tian, everyone's initial conflict had gradually turned into admiration. To have the courage to try out the Whirlpool Sword spirit tempering technique, such a person was a true warrior. Furthermore, as the king of a constellation, to be so resolute, decisive and fierce, it made people revere him. Long Shou-Jing shook his head. Then you will have to pay the price of more than 6 people. How many gold rank martial artists of Draco Constellation are left? Only 6. What about the half-step gold rank martial artists? There are only 30 of them, and that is already the last strength of Draco Constellation. After a while, Long Shou-Jing did not have any reply. The few heavenly dragon martial artists looked at each other. They had spent a lot of effort to investigate the origins of these 3 people with the intention of making a contribution. But now, His Highness only said, "I got it," and did not continue. Immediately, the few of them were at a loss. Yaya took out 2 leg bones from nowhere, and had an eager expression on its face. Music could make people relax. Your Highness, relax, we will definitely send the best internal affairs talents of Draco constellation over. But Cetus constellation. Long Shou-jing muttered as if deep in thought, I got it. That was not the most excessive. Coming to listen to Tang Tian's howls every day became the best way for everyone to relax. Your Highness, these people definitely want to harm His Majesty. If we let them go, I'm afraid. One of the Draco martial artists tried to persuade him. Long Shou-jing could not help but sigh in his heart. Since he had already done it, then he had to do it better. He muttered for a while. Ursa Major Constellation's internal affairs talents are preserved very well, but they are currently in conflict with His Majesty, and Lupus Constellation itself does not have many talents, and Andromeda Constellation has yet to recover. To us, this is a rare opportunity. Let the various families send some experts over. Don't use mediocre people to make up the numbers. If you regret it in the future, don't blame others. Have you checked it out? Long Shou-jing asked gently. As long as these people stood firm, then Draco Constellation's future position would naturally not be low. 40%. The Draco martial artist stammered. Long Shou-jing's gaze landed on them and asked directly, You guys have the confidence to win against them? Tang Tian was humiliated to realize that he actually could not help but follow Yaya's rhythm and howl. Do you want to feel good? Bing glanced at Ling Su. Everyone was solemn. Although they were in and out of the palace and were influenced by what they saw and heard, and were proficient in crafty plots and schemes, but they were still martial artists. What martial artists admired the most were always strong martial artists. Everyone kept quiet. You guys are just anxious. Long Shou-jing comforted them and said gently, In this period of time, the other party will not have the chance. What you guys need to do is to work hard to raise your standards. Liang Feng's position as a saint does not represent Draco constellation. If you guys want to gain something, there are only two ways. One is to become a saint, the other is to seriously groom the new generation. This war will definitely not end in a few years. Let's go. Crane took the lead and flew along the rope. He had a lot of things on his hands and was already extremely busy, but after hearing Tang Tian's howl for half an hour, his life was once again filled with hope. He heard some rustling sounds beside his ear. What would the future Ursa Major constellation be like? Long Shou-jing suddenly had some expectations. Tang Tian could clearly feel every bit of pain. Tang Tian finally had a deep understanding of the darkness of human nature. This group of assholes. Wait till I get out, you guys better watch out. Tang Tian howled and cursed in his heart. Chapter 449. Sima Xiao also noticed the quickly approaching scouts. His somewhat childish face was surprisingly calm, like a deep lake, calm without any ripples. Tang Tian's whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique shocked Bing. Scorpio constellation was quiet and continued to be quiet. How many years will that take? Scorpio constellation's star power concentration suddenly increased by a large margin. Sai Lei's face was filled with joy. The dragon crystal spirit core ores was something she wanted. It was an extremely rare material and was a specialty of Draco constellation. When Sai Lei was researching on the various materials, he had a surprising discovery in a dragon crystal spirit core ores, which could seal spirit generals. He quickly found the important part of the plan, and at that time he thought there must be something special inside to make Master willing to take such a huge risk. On top of a sparkling and translucent crystal floated a finger-sized spirit general. Once the war dragged on, everyone would be competing on their ability to produce blood. Scorpio constellation experienced a short period of shock and immediately went into an unprecedented celebration. Sima Zhao's gaze looked into the distance, the fanaticism in his eyes slowly becoming stronger, the soft and messy chestnut-colored hair that resembled a bird's nest. The childishness on his face was swept away and faintly revealed a tyrannical aura. The entire Heavens Road was holding their breaths, waiting for the Scorpio King to appear. This drop of spirit-devouring embryo is the latest technology. It is formed by extracting the fiercest spirit essence from spirit cards. Its ability to devour spirits is 1,000 times stronger than any other alliance general. Master, do not look down on this drop of spirit-devouring embryo. It cost 3 unique spirit cards, 10 purple gold grade cards, and even more gold grade cards. After a while, he awoke from his dream and immediately welcomed him, Master Yi. Bear Egg was currently filled with people. How is it? Sima Xiao asked. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse. The accumulation of tens of thousands of years was not ordinary. Aya, senior brother, don't feel inferior, not everyone is crazy. Sima Xiao consoled. Hearing that, Sima Xiao cut his finger and squeezed out a drop of blood, and dripped it into the crystal test tube. Thank you, Master Kuei. Sima Xiao bowed. Scorpio Magatama? De Rong was startled. After a while, his face changed, his voice trembled. The 4 words had a huge impact on him, causing his mind to go blank. Sima Xiao spoke to the ordinary-looking old man beside him. However, they soon encountered a problem when they were refining the Soul Core Dragon Crystal. They couldn't refine a complete Soul Core Dragon Crystal. The more complete the Dragon Crystal Spirit Core was, the stronger the spirit generals it could contain. His heart skipped a beat. De Rong's actions were the key to the entire plan. He knew how long his junior brother had prepared for this plan. When this fellow was sent to a remote constellation, he had already started to formulate this plan. Population. Just as everyone was discussing about the Ursa Major constellation, an even more shocking and explosive news swept through all the major constellations like a hurricane. In the mechanism laboratory, the lights were completely lit. Everyone was dirty, their eyes bloodshot. There were piles and piles of scrap parts and metal scraps. There was not even a place to stand. Many of the mechanical engineers found a random spot in the corner to take a nap, sleeping soundly. Bing was like a patient hunter, calmly and patiently waiting for his strength to rise. Sima Xiao then asked, "What about the casualties?" The scout replied excitedly. With high morale, he turned and disappeared into the distance like a big bird. Sima Xiao said solemnly, "The Scorpio dynasty collapsed due to internal strife. Scorpio King Wang died in the palace. Under the protection of the loyal guards, his wife took Magatama and escaped the palace, fleeing for over 10,000 li, and then Magatama disappeared. Seeing this cave today, I finally understood. All the guards died and transformed into spirits and sealed Magatama. To seal a saint treasure, there must be a saint-level spirit general below. And for it to not disappear after 10,000 years, it requires an extremely dense death aura. This cave is not normal. In the era of the 3 great armies, this was an important passage to Scorpio constellation where an extremely intense battle occurred, and it was said that the entire cave was filled with blood. After that, the death aura became too dense, so it was abandoned and sealed. What a strong death aura! Qiu Zhijun could not help but hold on to his sword hilt. The dense death aura that came out from the cave made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Now you can be at ease. Qiu Zhijun smiled. His heart was extremely happy. If we win this battle, junior brother will soar into the sky, and no one will be able to stop him. Junior brother has spent so much effort on this plan, and victory is the best reward for him. And today, they finally refined a complete Dragon Crystal Spirit Core. Very quickly, new characteristics were discovered. Other than being able to seal spirit generals, after refinement, it could also nourish spirit generals, allowing them to become even stronger and pure. Inside the bear egg, there was only one topic: special training. His gaze unconsciously landed on his junior brother's face. The shortcoming of all these armies was the realm of true power. Of course, in Bing's eyes, all these armies were cannon fodder, but if they were able to raise their true power by 2 levels, they would be able to become elite cannon fodder. The only reason for Scorpio constellation's decline was because of the disappearance of the Saint Treasure. Scorpio constellation's martial techniques were preserved rather well among the many constellations. As long as Scorpio constellation found the Saint Treasure, Scorpio constellation would definitely welcome a revival. But he never thought that it would be the Scorpio Magatama. Sima Zhao's soft brown hair was blown by the wind like a bird's nest. The wind on the roof of the carriage was strong, but he did not feel it. Beside him, Qiu Zhijun sat cross-legged. His shoulder-length hair was blown by the wind. His pale white face looked as though he had just recovered from a serious illness. But it was not only the armies that were fighting for their lives. Scorpio constellation was a constellation that established a dynasty, the final winner of the era of the three great armies. Although it had declined for a long time, but unlike Ophiuchus constellation, Scorpio constellation had never fallen from the ecliptic palace constellations. But in the bear egg that had more than 40% star power concentration, as long as one was not too lazy, it was not a big problem. That was also why the 12 ecliptic palaces far surpassed the other constellations. They had denser star power concentration and could attract more talented martial artists. The merging and devouring of spirit generals required many techniques and knowledge, just like blood meridian specialists, just that the refining spirit specialist was an occupation unique to the clan union. The few strongest alliance generals of the clan union all came from the hands of Master Kuei. Rongda's pupils constricted again. The old man was unfamiliar. He had never seen him before, but the name Master Kuei, he had heard of it before. Master Kuei, the most powerful refining spirit specialist in the clan union. Sima Zhao chuckled and spat out 4 words, Scorpio Magadama. But Rongda knew that Sima Zhao had always planned far ahead, and with such an order he would definitely be prepared. And Master's character was decisive and firm. Once he gave the order, he would definitely not waver. When the 400 tons of Dragon Crystal Spirit Core ores were sent to the Mechanical Research Laboratory, the entire Mechanical Research Laboratory was like clockwork, immersing themselves in research day and night. In this period of time, the other constellations were not clear of the actual situation of Ursa Major constellation. Adding Tang Tian's Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering Technique, it caused people to be even more fearful and instead obtained a rare period of peace. If they did not grab hold of this period of time to raise their strength, then their future days would not be easy. Sima Zhao patted Rongda's broad shoulders and said, "Have you found the place?" Ta Dun's Andromeda army had also quietly arrived at the Bear Egg 4 special training. Placed in the pitiful 1% star power concentration of Lupus constellation, to raise true power by 2 levels, the expenditure and cost was undoubtedly astonishing. Suddenly, someone in the corner shouted, "Success! I did it!" Even Tang Yi's Lupus army was currently undergoing special training inside the Bear Egg. This was a problem that any military general with a bit of standard could see, but no one cared, because no one believed that the war would develop to such a stage. The situation was already in chaos, the wind and rain were already wavering, and the future had become even more blurry. Kuei will definitely give it his all. Master Kuei's expression was solemn. He carefully took out a crystal test tube. Inside it was a ball of mist churning. "Master, please drip a drop of blood." Grabbing the sword beside him, he stood up. Without hesitation, he turned and left. Whirlpool Sword Spirit Tempering Technique, as expected of a godlike young man. This discovery caused all the mechanical engineers in the Mechanical Research Laboratory to go completely crazy. Blood vessels covered his entire body, making him look like a human. Yi Zhaogu slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were calm and deep, without a trace of hostility. The stubble on his face was extremely dense, his hair was messy, his entire body was mottled with scars, his clothes were tattered, but his entire body revealed a sense of tranquility. When this news came out, it caused an uproar, causing all the other news to pale in comparison, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Until today, when the Scorpio constellation's star power concentration suddenly soared by 7 points, after an unknown period of time, he came back to his senses. The carriage's speed was very fast. 3 days later, they landed in the depths of a mountain. When Rongda received the mission, he was already filled with suspicions. The target of the mission was actually in the depths of Scorpio constellation. If their movements were to be exposed, it would immediately attract Scorpio constellation's intense retaliation. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse, and the clan union's current strength was still inferior to Scorpio constellation, so Master would immediately be in a passive situation. 3. Spirit City. The Scorpio Magma was the sacred treasure of the Scorpio constellation. Only Bing, who had been through it all, was secretly making preparations. History was always shockingly similar. Bing looked at the image in front of him and leisurely puffed out a smoke ring and muttered to himself, "Scorpio, hee, old opponent, getting more and more interesting." But Bing did not have any fear towards the 12 ecliptic palaces. The impact of this matter was huge. Even the Honorable Martial Alliance and Leo Constellation, who were in the midst of fighting, all chose to stop fighting. Master's target was actually Scorpio Constellation. Everyone understood what that meant. There was only one possibility: the birth of the Saint Treasure. A new generation of mechanical spirit weapons was about to be born. Found it. Rongda led the way. After a moment, they arrived at a bottomless hole. The hole was shrouded in mist. Qiu Zhijun said with a bit of self-mockery, "A tempering spirit technique that swordsmen do not dare to use was actually used on a close-quarters combat expert." An intense joy surged in his heart. Qiu Zhijun's face could not help but reveal a rare smile. Once the step was completed, then the entire plan would be half a success. There were not many people in the 12 ecliptic palaces, and with the exorbitant usage of star power, ordinary people were unable to establish a foothold there. Rongda did not make a sound, and quietly brought his army into Scorpio constellation. Very quickly, he realized the master's preparations were extremely ample. The Starry Door garrison was bribed, and the route they took was obviously meticulously prepared. They were all deep mountains and forests that were rarely visited by humans, without any signs of human habitation, and on the way, they avoided the territories of a few strong star spirit beasts, so the entire army was close to their destination. When he pushed open the courtyard door, the martial artists who were waiting respectfully outside, upon seeing Yi Zhaoge, were stunned for a few seconds. Is this still the killing god Yi Zhaoge? Filled with a tranquil aura, it made Yi Zhaoge feel as though he was a different person. They were like the tip of a pyramid, with the constellations below them sending talents upwards. The most outstanding martial artists, the best training environment. How could the 12 ecliptic palaces not be strong? The surrounding 13 strongholds have already been purged, no one was left alive, and no one else was alerted. Rongda replied straightforwardly. Tang Tian's whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique caused the star power concentration in bear eggs to directly break through 40%. Such an opportunity, no one was willing to miss it. Bing carefully analyzed the situation and boldly transferred all the armies to bear eggs for special training. Good place. Master Kuei stood at the side of the cave and observed, and could not help but exclaim excitedly, "The grievance and death aura is so dense, there must be an extremely strong spirit general below." Heaven's road sank into an unprecedented silence. Everyone had forgotten about them for too long, but no one had forgotten that this was a constellation that had once established a dynasty, a constellation that had lost its saint treasure but had not fallen from the 12 ecliptic palaces. It was a dangerous and terrifying constellation. Qiu Zhijun laughed, and just as he was about to close his eyes, suddenly, a few black dots lit up in the distance. The 12 ecliptic palaces walked the path of elites. Once their experts were exhausted, it would be difficult to replenish them. In times of peace, they could still rely on their superior conditions to attract geniuses from other constellations. But in times of war, the flow of people between the various constellations would be strictly controlled, and at that time, the 12 ecliptic palaces would face the predicament of not having enough manpower. This was Scorpio constellation's territory. Master Kuei became even more excited, his face flushed red. Good place. Good place. A land of blood battles, saint-level spirit generals, there is no better place than this. Bang, the entire mechanical laboratory exploded, all of the mechanical engineers rushed over from all corners. Only at that moment did he understand Sima Zhao's ambition was much bigger than what he had imagined. Now it had awoken. Rongda said solemnly, 22 people died. The generations of Scorpio martial artists had spent countless of effort to search everywhere, but to no avail. They did not care who became their king. What they cared about was, they did not even have a king. The student army had already been disbanded, and the students once again returned to Sky Marshal Wolf Academy. Towards the students, he had high hopes, and the battle was to let the students experience a real battle. Although their performance had improved greatly, but in Bing's eyes, they still needed to continue learning. But the students did not return to Lupus Constellation, because Sky Marshal Wolf Academy had moved from Lupus Constellation to Bear Egg. Yi Zhaoji's gaze looked over, causing the martial artist to feel his entire body tighten. His heart actually did not have any thoughts of resisting, and could not help but be overwhelmed with shock. He knew how powerful it was, and fiercely bit the tip of his tongue. The pain caused him to sober up. Ignoring the blood taste in his mouth, he lowered his head and spoke respectfully. Emergency meeting. The clan elders hope that once Master comes out, you can immediately join the meeting. Master Kuei spoke about his own domain. His expression was solemn and confident. Sima Zhao's face revealed a look of praise. You've worked hard, victory is right in front of us. We cannot relax. Get everyone to raise their spirits. After we win, I will hold a celebration for everyone. The scout nimbly landed on the carriage, his expression excited. Master, everything is going smoothly. The current generation of people did not have any concept of the chaotic world, or the true heavens road great war. But Bing, who had survived the most bitter battles, was very clear on what was the most important. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, and with one look he could tell that it was his own scout. Vengeful spirit seal, no wonder no one could find it. Sima Zhao muttered. The martial artist felt the pressure around him disappear, and heaved a sigh of relief. Furthermore, he had stood his ground and pushed for the Clan Union's Spirit General Fusion technique, creating an army and a series of other measures, showing that he was a wise leader. Rongda welcomed him. Rongda's weathered face finally had a change. He looked at Sima Zhao in shock. He had always admired Sima Zhao. The master's foresight was profound, his methods were shrewd and ruthless, he was a frank person, and was a good person to be loyal to. Sima Zhao quietly controlled the Sima family, quietly obtained the support of the majority of the clan elders, and secretly controlled the clan union. Yi Zhaoge replied, lead the way. But the clan union's composition was complicated, the organization was loose, with many families and factions, it had an inherent weakness. Rongda's judgment of Sima Zhao was that he was a tyrant. Of course, Bing had always encouraged Tang Tian's torturous actions. To boost morale, all the martial artists that came to Bear Egg to train would be brought to Tang Tian, and the reason was to find happiness? Oh no, find motivation. Rongda blurted out, what's inside? Upon saying it, he immediately regretted it. The operation was extremely secretive. He knew that the master's plan was huge. If the outside world knew about it, it would definitely cause an uproar. For the sake of not leaking out, he did not leave a single person alive in the 13 strongholds. Master Kuei, come and take a look. The battle after that did not have anything out of the ordinary. In front of the army, the strongholds were like defenseless, other than the fact that they did not expect the stronghold residents to retaliate so fiercely, resulting in a large number of casualties. The entire process of the battle could be said to be extremely smooth. Upon contact with the mist, the blood droplets started to churn intensely, countless of blood threads surged, and after a while, the blood threads once again converged to form a thumb-sized human figure. He turned the test tube upside down, and the blood vessels inside dripped into the mist like a water droplet. This meant that as long as they succeeded, they would be able to create mechanical spirit weapons with growth attributes. He respectfully bowed towards the wooden hut. I'm leaving. The Saint Treasure of Scorpio Constellation, after 10,000 years, had once again established a connection with Scorpio Constellation. Out of the few constellations under Tang Tian, Bing placed the most importance on the barren Lupus Constellation, because Lupus Constellation had an extremely large population. He had been rather free recently. With the collapse of the Scorpio dynasty, the Saint Treasure of Scorpio Magatama also disappeared, causing Scorpio Constellation to fall. But, no matter how much Scorpio Constellation fell, it was still an ecliptic palace constellation. Many people had thought that Scorpio constellation would be like Ophiuchus constellation and fall from the ecliptic palace to the equator. But Scorpio constellation stubbornly defended itself as an ecliptic palace constellation. Chapter 450. He stopped and watched. The martial artist leading the way did not rush him and waited patiently at the side. The lady was shocked and angry at the same time and was about to pounce towards Bing. The beautiful woman suddenly stopped. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling, but she knew that if she continued to struggle, her master would suffer even more humiliation. She allowed Duan Mu to tie her up. Her gaze was filled with hatred as she gritted her teeth and said, "You will regret this. Then these two can be exchanged for quite a lot of ransom money." "Sai Lei, how dare you?" The middle-aged man was both shocked and angry. Bing calmly gave the middle-aged man a few slaps. The middle-aged man's dignified face swelled up like a pig's head. The middle-aged man was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He had never experienced such humiliation before. Hearing that the mechanical spirit weapons were created by a mechanical grandmaster called Sai Lei, and that Sai Lei was a lady, Hua Chenyun's heart was filled with curiosity and anticipation. Oh, it was not a mechanical weapon, it was a mechanical spirit weapon. Bing laughed. "No worries, I know what I'm doing." Hua Chenyun looked around and secretly nodded his head. The scale of 3 spirit cities base far exceeded his imagination. His gaze fell on the training field. "You are our master engineer. How many years has it been since we last had a master engineer? Hey, we're counting on you to make a lot of money for us. You actually dared to come in front of me and try to poach me, hee hee." Bing's last coup was filled with killing intent. He walked in front of the two of them and blew smoke in their faces. Those who dared to do that in the past were all beaten up by me until they cried for their mothers. It was a pity that Crazy Tang was not here. Oh, what would he do? Oh, he will definitely hang you up. This uncultured guy likes this kind of thing the most. Not good, not good. I have to train him to pursue higher things. But Bing flicked the cigarette ash and asked Sai Lei, "Do you want to do it personally?" Sai Lei looked at Bing. "Do you know who they are?" Sai Lei's tone was bone-chilling. "Make it clear whose elder you are. When I was 12, the year after my mother passed away, you expelled me from the family. I was penniless. If I hadn't met my teacher, I would have starved to death on the streets. What? Now you're my elder?" Who? A palm pierced through the lingering smoke and grabbed the middle-aged man. Sai Lei was actually a member of the Ivan family. Bing said leisurely to the middle-aged man, "Your subordinates do not pity you at all." Suddenly, he noticed a man and woman hanging at the center of the training ground, and he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "That's alright." Duan Mu hurriedly dragged the two of them and ran out. "I'm serious." Sai Lei said solemnly, "The Fan family's power is much stronger than you think. They have a deep foundation in the spirit region." Duan Mu's figure flashed and blocked in front of the lady. Her aura suddenly dispersed, and the temperature in the room plummeted. A cold smile appeared on Sai Lei's face. "It's definitely not a problem to exchange it for 1 billion or 800 million. Sai Lei sat down. "We have completely offended the Fan family. Do you know the nickname of the Fan family in the Taurus constellation? The gangster family has always been unscrupulous in their revenge. TSK, a pig-like subordinate, will drag down the master." Bing patted the middle-aged man's swollen face, his face full of sincerity. Bing laughed. "Even bigger than the Honorable Martial Alliance? The Ivan family won't let you off." The woman screamed. "Silence." The room sank into silence. "Ha, little Sai Lei, in terms of gangsters, not many people can compare to us." Bing laughed out loud. Bing frivolously puffed out a smoke ring and winked at Sai Lei. "He's a tyrant." Sai Lei's face turned gloomy. "What are you doing here?" Hua Chenyun suddenly felt that the matter was not that simple. Fan family. If he did not give her a few slaps today. The martial artist looked at the two people who were tied up, his gaze filled with unkindness. The two were tied up tightly, their faces red and swollen as they stood in the corner. As expected of a mechanical spirit weapon, Hua Chenyun quickly came to a conclusion: this brand new mechanical weapon was much stronger than the traditional mechanical weapons. The middle-aged man was enraged. "You dare!" Someone came to find them. The middle-aged man's expression froze. Sai Lei sneered. "When I was 12 years old and was chased out of the family, I had already drawn the line with you. We don't welcome you here, you can scram now." "This way please." The martial artist leading the way said politely. "Of course we have to take care of our little friend's feelings. Although we don't know about the conflict between you guys, but it is obvious that we are helping her." Bing laughed. "She is our mechanical grandmaster. To let her vent her anger, her mood will be good, and her efficiency will be off the charts, then we can earn money." "Brother, it's not easy to earn money these days." Sai Lei was startled, then laughed. "That's not true." Duanmu shuddered. The middle-aged man's face darkened. The beautiful lady behind him could not help but scold. "Impudent! A slut who was chased out of the family dares to spout such nonsense." The haze on her face dissipated. "That's right, no one cared about the honorable martial alliance, so why would they care about that despicable family?" The martial artist leading the way glanced at them and snorted. "I heard that they are from the Fan family, and said that they are Miss Sai Lei's elders." "Humph, Miss Sai Lei is truly pitiful. She was chased out of the family at 12 years old, and almost starved to death. Now that Mrs. Rich, these dogs hit things are shamelessly running over." "Xiao Lei." The middle-aged man smiled, and placed the teacup in his hand down. "Why? You don't recognize second uncle anymore?" Sai Lei's anger gradually subsided, noticing that Bing was staring at her weirdly for a long time. Thinking about the poker face's loyal performance just now, she said unhappily, "Say what you want to say." "Hey, hang it up, Sai Lei. Your taste is getting closer to Crazy Tang as expected. This fellow is here to pull down everyone's taste?" Bing touched his chin and teased. The middle-aged man was about 40 years old. His clothes were exquisite. He had an extraordinary bearing, minding his own business and drinking tea, without a hint of uneasiness. The beautiful lady beside him was not to be underestimated. "Thank you for your concern." Bing bit on his cigarette and pretended to return the courtesy. Bing immediately lost interest and said lazily, "Only so little, seems like these two people's positions are not that high. But no matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat, so I'll just have to put up with it." "Hang them up," Sai Lei said fiercely. The middle-aged man's face turned green and red. After being humiliated again, he finally could not help but shout, "Sai Lei, the blood flowing in your body is ultimately the Fan family's blood. It's fine if you don't think of giving birth, but to actually treat your elders like this sounds powerful." Bing's face was shocked. Sai Lei rushed in and roared, "Poker face, if you don't give me an explanation today, you're dead." Without thinking, Duanmu's figure flashed and appeared beside the lady like a ghost. "Their power is huge." Sai Lei bit her lips, feeling complicated. She knew that Bing was helping her vent her anger, but, "Sire, why are you humiliating me like this? What is your intention? Why don't you say it?" The middle-aged man said. "Sire, isn't this too rash?" The middle-aged man said, "Although Sai Lei has some achievements in mechanical techniques, but the Han family's strength is ultimately not something a small mechanical engineer can compare to. If Sire is willing to hand Sai Lei over to the Han family will definitely give you a satisfactory reward." The beautiful lady's face revealed an arrogant look. The middle-aged man was much calmer, but he could not help but straighten his back. Bing noticed that the beautiful lady behind the middle-aged man had a look of disdain. "Oh, seems like it's getting interesting. Reason?" Bing looked at the middle-aged man with a look of admiration. "The reason is simple, to let Sai Lei vent her anger." "I don't know." Bing did not care. "Of course, it's not too late for you to say it now." "Oh, you want to talk about the consequences?" "Don't bother about such cliches. Obviously they are trying to poach you, tsk. It's already good that they did not chop them up and feed them to the dogs. If Crazy Tang was here, they would already be minced meat. I'm still too kind." Sai Lei suddenly shouted. Duan Mu! She screamed, "You guys are crazy." The lady was so angry that she laughed. In her eyes, Sai Lei's position was extremely low. To actually spout such arrogant words to slap her, her killing intent soared, and she was about to make a move. A resounding slap interrupted the middle-aged man's words. Sai Lei's face surfaced a smile, and suddenly said, "Duan Mu, slap her." The beautiful lady was shocked. Her attention was all on Duan Mu. She never thought that the spirit general would suddenly make a move. Her master was captured, and she immediately fell into a passive situation. The two of them were stunned again. Suddenly they felt their bodies turning cold. Only then did they notice Bing's passionate gaze seemed to want to swallow them up. Under the bright lights, in the spacious training grounds, mechanical weapons could be seen everywhere training. I said, "Don't come and disturb me for this period of time. Don't tell me you guys disregarded my words." Sai Lei's roar came from outside the door. It was obvious that she was extremely unhappy and was on the verge of exploding. Her words stopped abruptly. He was a scheming person. After calming down from his anger, he immediately felt that Bing's sudden outburst most likely had a deeper meaning. In a fight between subordinates, people with a bit of status would not directly make a move that was too lowly. Without saying a word, Duan Mu knocked the two of them unconscious. He desperately prayed in his heart, "Please do not be implicated, please. I coincidentally had something to do in the spirit region, so I came to see you. Your father misses you, and hopes that you can go back to visit him." The middle-aged man's smile was very amiable. Sai Lei said expressionlessly, "Taurus constellation's Ivan family, one of the Taurus constellation's oldest distinguished families, they are truly rich." He suddenly raised his head and looked at the beautiful lady in astonishment. "If the master is humiliated, the subject must die. How can you not do anything?" When Duan Mu heard the lady scolding Sai Lei, his heart was already filled with surprise. Did this lady's brain get caught in a door? She dared to scold big sister Sai Lei. This kind of courage is truly worthy of respect. Slap, slap, slap. The loud slaps interrupted her screams. When he heard big sister Sai Lei's words, he immediately quivered. After being in the base for so long, he had more or less grasped the temper of the few leaders. Big sister was angry. Duan Mu quivered. "Big sister?" Bing bit on the cigarette. Through the lingering smoke, he quietly observed the man opposite him. Bing effortlessly dragged the middle-aged man over. He bit on the cigarette and slapped the middle-aged man's face. "Pa, a wise man submits to circumstances. To call you a brat at this time is truly not a good choice." Pa pa pa. A few more slaps, completely stunning the middle-aged man. Chapter 451. The bronze door slowly closed. If the constellation inheritance was the backbone of the martial technique system, then unique martial techniques were the pinnacle and extreme of the various branches. The constellation inheritance relied on the development of star power, which allowed them to have a deep foundation and allowed them to experience the perfection and development of generations of martial artists. In other words, the constellation inheritance was the product of group wisdom. Tang Tian, who was in the whirlpool of swords, screamed, but he secretly decided, no matter how difficult Big Brother Jing Hao's request was, he had to complete it. Who's going first? Bing's gaze landed on the three of them. Bing was slightly nervous. In his era, the martial techniques system had not developed to its current stage. Unique martial techniques were extremely rare, and unique cards were even rarer, so they would not be wasted in the Spirit Hall. The Spirit Hall was only used for temporary replenishment, and was mostly used in battles. But when he saw Jing Hao standing in front of him, he was still shocked. Suddenly, he thought of the rumors. The rumors said that since young, Jing Hao had set his heart on creating his own sword technique, and from the looks of it, the rumors were probably true. Although Hua Qinyun's background was huge, but why would Bing place all his hopes on Hua Qinyun? Of course he had other things to rely on, and that was the unique card in his hands. Senior wants me to be the reference? Jing Hao somewhat understood. Me. Tang Yi took half a step forward. Jing Hao praised, as expected of Senior Hunter. I heard that Senior is good at grooming students, and I have finally experienced it today. With such a good opportunity, Jing Hao will naturally not miss it. When Adrian saw Jing Hao, his heart trembled. Jing Hao's aura was actually not released at all. Such extreme control made people speechless. Just based on this, it was not simple. Adrian said, "If I am not wrong, Mr. Jing's sword technique emphasizes on precision and control, and for the tens of thousands of chaotic auras, to cause them to resonate, to Mr. Jing's precision and control, it is a very strict test. What do you need me to do?" Jing Hao was very straightforward. But Tang Yi took the initiative to find Bing, and strongly requested to participate in the upgrade. Number 07 Army Barracks had been renovated, and the functions of the Spirit Hall had been completely restored, which made Bing even more confident. After an extraordinary person died, even his soul would not be willing to be ordinary. Adrian muttered, "I've been studying how to improve everyone's cultivation efficiency during this period of time. Mr. Jing must also know that this kind of situation couldn't last long." Currently, the star power concentration of the bear egg had reached a maximum of 43%. It would be a pity if he missed this opportunity. "That's because I've thought of an idea that requires Mr. Arise power. It sounds like your screams are full of energy. It seems like you're enjoying it." Jing Hao laughed. "All right, I'll wait for you here." Jing Hao nodded. Out of the 10 unique cards from Draco Constellation, Han Bingning, Liang Qiu, Amauri, Sima Xiangshan, Duan Mu and Qi Guang had 1 each, leaving him with 4. The unique cards were no longer useful to Tang Tian. Ling Su and Crane had their own inheritances, and Jing Hao was determined to create his own sword Dao. Constellations were always held in the hands of a few people, and the high-quality star power resources were usually controlled by a few people. But there were many martial artists in the world, and there were always some talented people, geniuses who were brimming with unique ideas. Although they did not have the abundant star power as their foundation, but at the same time, they were not restricted. They wantonly displayed their talents, and in their hands, all sorts of inconceivable and amazing martial techniques were born. Adrian was well aware of the cruel competition within the Honorable Martial Alliance. To be able to be viewed as a genius young man, how could he not have a few tricks up his sleeve? They might be eccentric, ruthless, or gloomy, but the pride, persistence, and determination that they had when they were alive were similarly preserved. Upon placing the spirit card on the bronze door suddenly released a cloud of smoke. Inside the smoke, a ferocious and ruthless figure could be vaguely seen roaring, occasionally looking through the smoke, causing the 3 of them to be fearful. Jing Hao turned his head and looked at Adrian in surprise. Adrian's reputation was rather good, especially in nurturing young people, and the other party was much older. Jing Hao politely greeted, "Senior Hunter." Jing Hao was taken aback. "Please guide me, Senior." But if he wanted them to improve further, he needed to use the unique card. He was also curious what would happen if he used the unique card to improve his spirit general. Such a genius, in any era, would be the most dazzling. Even the Constellation Masters with overflowing power, when faced with these extraordinary geniuses, had to restrain their arrogance and show respect. In front of the Spirit Hall's bronze door, other than Tang Yi and Tang Chou, there was also a suave and calm figure in a white robe, young Master Magic Flute. Magic Flute was rather curious the entire way. The Southern Cross Army was also very far away from his era. From the looks of it, everything was going smoothly, and all that was left was to wait patiently. The unique cards that these geniuses left behind, other than their astonishing martial techniques, they also left behind their martial spirits. Adrian heaved a sigh of relief. To cause such a widespread resonance, we need a reference object. Let everyone compare it at the same time. Jing Hao immediately replied, "Mr. Hunter, if you have any instructions, please do not hesitate to speak." The remaining 4 cards were all in Bing's hands, adding the unused Thunder Radiant Hammer. Bing had a total of 5 unique cards. "This foolish brother has a request." Jing Hao continued. As expected of a unique card, Bing did not say anything. Out of the 3, Tang Yi's foundation was the worst, and the possibility of failure was the highest. The travel-worn Jing Hao, upon seeing the gigantic bear egg, could not help but be in a trance. He finally came out, the current him, his chi was reserved, and looked like an ordinary person. But looking at Jing Hao, his heart moved. Mr. Jing. Jing Hao listened carefully. Although Adrian was not his opponent in terms of attainments in sword techniques, but in terms of Adrian's standard in grooming martial artists, he was 18 streets ahead of Jing Hao. Yaya saw Jing Hao and obediently stopped beating the drum. For some reason, its heart was filled with reverence towards Jing Hao. Adrian knew that Jing Hao held a high position by Tang Tian's side, so he would not neglect him, and personally brought Jing Hao to the center of the bear egg. Tang Tian, who was inside the whirlpool sword, had tears streaming down his face. As expected, Big Brother Jing Hao is loyal. Resonance. Adrian explained. The concentration of martial artists in the bear egg is the highest I have ever seen. The entire bear egg can accommodate 520,000 martial artists to train at the same time, and in truth, this place has never been empty. In such a small area, to accommodate so many martial artists to train together, I realized that there is a very frequent energy resonance phenomenon. This rarely seen resonance phenomenon can raise the efficiency of true power training to a certain extent. Berg. This subordinate understands. Tang Ili landed on the ground and replied without turning back. He entered the spirit hall. The miserable shrieks inside the whirlpool sword's spirit tempering technique stopped and became even more mournful. A smile appeared on Adrian's face. Coming to Tang Tian's place to find happiness was already a daily occurrence for everyone in the bear egg. This was its advantage, but it was also a limitation, because its development route was unable to go against the nature of the star power itself. The ferocious chi from the spirit general made Bing's face reveal a look of joy. Gradually, the spirit general in the mist struggled and became weaker. Threads of mist seeped into the bronze door, and the figure of the spirit general, with a speed visible to the naked eye, became weaker and fainter. He laughed involuntarily. This weird name attracted the ridicule of everyone inside and outside. But this was Crazy Tang style. The hesitation on Bing's face disappeared. Since Tang had already entered, then there was no way out. Out of the 5 unique spirit cards, he picked out the weakest one, which was a 1-star unique spirit general card. I'd like to hear the details. Jing Hao asked curiously. How to raise the efficiency of training was always the goal of every constellation and powerhouse. Adrian was famous for grooming students. When he said that he thought of a way to raise the efficiency, it was probably not empty words. The contrast between the two caused Jing Hao's reputation to be very different. Some felt that he was undeserving of his reputation. Some felt that he definitely had something special about him. He had a total of 5 unique spirit cards in his hands. Adrian had once seriously researched on Tang Tian, so of course he had some understanding of Jing Hao. For a very long time, Jing Hao's strength was not outstanding compared to Yi Zhao Gu and the rest. He was still an honorable martial alliance's sword genius. Bing was quiet for a moment, then said, "Inside, I am most worried about you. If you want to continue to improve, you must have unique spirit cards. But if you fail, you'll be reduced to ashes." Looking at Adrian's back view as he left, Jing Hao turned to look at Tang Tian. "You and I are brothers. We are going to fight side by side again." Adrian admitted, "That's right, it was the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique that gave me inspiration. But, to Mr. Jing's training, it might be of help." Jing Hao's expression was sincere. "Brother, when the time comes, please shout louder. Please shout more miserably. I think, no matter how difficult the situation is, as long as I think of your situation, I will definitely be filled with courage, and definitely be able to complete this training." Originally, his name list did not include Tang Yi, because Tang Yi's martial spirit was the weakest, the lowest level. Low-level martial spirits, the spirit generals that were produced, did not have much potential to improve. For Tang Yi to be able to reach his current level, it had already made Bing extremely surprised and surprised. Alive as an outstanding person, dead as a heroic spirit. That was a unique martial technique. Even Big Brother Jing Hao was like that. Is there no hope left in this world? Jing Hao stood in front of Tang Tian, looking at Tang Tian's 60m thick whirlpool sword. He clicked his tongue in wonder. I never thought that you would actually use a swordsman's method to temper your martial spirit, and such a tyrannical and extreme method. Adrian continued. The stronger the energy resonance, the more helpful it is to the training of true power. This is what I am thinking. If everyone can resonate at the same time, then it will be of great help to the training of true power. Adrian nodded his head. Then I will go and prepare. Adrian said calmly, I want to ask Mr. Jing for a favor. Sounds like it is somewhat similar to the whirlpool sword spirit tempering technique. Jing Hao somewhat understood. Adrian replied solemnly, That's right. The requirements for this position are extremely high. It requires an extremely strong willpower, extremely strong control over true power, and extremely sensitive to qi. The resonance produced by hundreds of thousands of people will be centered around you, and you will be the center of the storm. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.